the Hogwarts professor mixed into Marvel. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 176, Tony's weapon. Natasha speculation. Shield. High-rise elevator. Coulson, dressed in a suit, sat in the elevator, holding a document in his hand, frowning, as if thinking about some difficult problem. Suddenly ding-dong. The elevator bell rang. Coulson looked up slightly and found that it was not his destination. Then, he saw the elevator door open and a familiar figure came in. Natasha, the Black Widow, wearing a tight combat suit. "Good morning, Natasha." "Good morning, Coulson." The two greeted each other. Natasha looked at the floor buttons that lit up in the elevator and said with a smile, "Coulson, you are also going to see the director?" "Yes." Coulson nodded and said, "You too?" Natasha nodded to show affirmation. Coulson nodded silently, and then, as if he suddenly thought of something, he asked with some expectation, "Natasha, how is the captain recovering?" Natasha felt Coulson's expectant tone, smiled and said, "Coulson, don't worry, the captain is fine and is recovering. Maybe you can see the captain in a while." After hearing this, Coulson's eyes revealed expectation, and then nodded. "If there is a chance, I will definitely try to get the captain's autograph. This is the dream of every captain's fan." Ding dong. Soon, with the elevator prompt sounding again, Coulson and Natasha looked at the floor and went out one after the other. Their destinations were the same, the director's office. Bang bang bang. Coulson knocked on the office door regularly and soon heard a voice coming from inside. "Come in." Then, Coulson pushed the door open and entered, followed by Natasha. Walking to the desk, Coulson looked at director Nick Fury, who was wearing a black windbreaker. He handed the document in his hand to him and said in a deep voice, "Director, the Wizard Gold Coin project has made progress. With Tony's participation, we have now successfully synthesized a Wizard Gold Coin. After testing, there is no problem with the material. It is almost exactly the same. However," Coulson hesitated and continued, "Tony mentioned that there may still be problems with the Wizard Gold Coin. According to his research, there is an unknown radiation on the Wizard Gold Coin. The nature is extremely special, and it cannot be synthesized. I don't know if it will have any impact." Hearing this, director Nick Fury said in a deep voice, "I remember that the last time Tony went to find the wizard professor, he successfully got back some magic metals, which seemed to be very valuable. This time, let him go again, and let him talk to the wizard professor clearly to see if he can get some more things back through him." Hearing the director's request, Coulson shook his head helplessly. "Director, I also explained similar requirements to Tony. After all, this unknown radiation is obviously related to wizards. But the problem is that Tony strongly refused. He said that he was researching some weapons recently and would go to see the wizard after the research was completed." At this point, Coulson raised his lips and teased, "I wonder if it was affected by the last large-scale evacuation of the Ancient Book Cafe. Given Tony's personality, if there is no corresponding solution, he will never meet again easily." Hearing this, Nick Fury raised his eyebrows. He knew Tony's arrogant personality. After suffering a loss, he would definitely get revenge. According to Coulson, Tony was researching some weapons, and he would go to see the wizard professor after the research was completed. Does this mean that? Then, he looked at Natasha, who was standing nearby watching the show, and said, "Natasha, how is the investigation into the resignation of all the employees of Ancient Book Cafe going? Is there any useful information?" Natasha said slowly, "Chief, all investigations have been completed. I found something interesting." "Oh?" Nick Fury asked, "What is it?" "Chief, I have talked to the 3 employees of Ancient Book Cafe one by one, and there is basically no valuable information. And I also talked to the manager May. Apart from hearing him mention that the wizard professor was going to set up a private reception venue, there was no valuable information." Nick Fury did not reply, but stared at Natasha, as if telling her to get to the point. Natasha understood and said, I find that this dismissal was most likely planned in advance by the wizard professor, because after talking to the store manager May, the wizard professor didn't seem to attach importance to the profit aspect. There are no arrangements for the book cafes either. It is very likely that they are just used as tools for a transitional period. So, the wizard professor will definitely use this book cafe in the future, and it will be of great use. I suggest that we must pay close attention to the Vincian book cafe, and it will definitely provide us with valuable information later. Hearing this, Nick Fury nodded slightly, to show that he understood. Then, Natasha said, I also found something interesting. This wizard professor is quite generous to his own people. He is not the kind of stingy or calculative person. He gave a lot of compensation to each clerk when they resigned, and May, the store manager, gave 1 million, saying it was for investment. So, if we establish a more friendly relationship with the wizard professor later, it is very likely that the wizard professor will stand on our side, and we are likely to get a lot of useful information. Hearing what Natasha said, Nick Fury immediately thought of the advice of his old boss Alexander Pearson nodded slowly. Nick Fury was about to give Carlson an order. Suddenly, buzz. The phone in Carlson's trouser pocket began to vibrate continuously, making a buzzing sound. Carlson looked at director Nick Fury and saw that the director nodded slightly, so he picked up the phone, looked at the name, and frowned slightly. Clicking to answer, he immediately said, "What happened to the wizard professor?" His phone was specially made, and ordinary calls could not be received at all. Only important calls could be connected. Sure enough, sir, something is wrong with the Universal Book Cafe. The machine indicates a large-scale energy change. And according to observation, the same phenomenon has occurred here as in the maze. All our agents cannot observe the location of the Universal Book Cafe, and pedestrians around will consciously avoid the original location. Including the agents we sent over, just like in the maze, they left involuntarily and walked to another location. Hearing this, Carlson quickly reported the situation to director Nick Fury. After hearing this, Natasha next to him showed a look of as expected on her face. She knew that the wizard professor definitely had other plans for the Universal Book Cafe. After listening to this, Nick Fury instructed Carlson, "Carlson, you continue to communicate with the wizard professor to explore the situation and try to trade new potions. The best effect is to quickly restore the human body." Hearing this, Carlson was thoughtful, as if he had thought of something, and his expression was a little excited. Then he nodded to show that he understood. Chapter 177 How to Take Advantage of the Marvel World. 117 Blake Street, New York Temple. In the spacious hall of the temple, 26 cushions were placed in the center of the hall in a strange trajectory. On each cushion, there was a mage sitting cross-legged. In the front was Cassilis, the garrison of the New York Temple. He was now leading the temple mages to do morning classes and maintain daily meditation. If you look closely, you will find that all the mages sitting cross-legged on the cushions have almost the same breathing rhythm. With each breath, you can vaguely see a faint golden light emerging from the surrounding space and merging into their bodies. This is the practice method of the Kamar-Taj mages, practicing magic with the help of Vishanti's power. At this moment, suddenly, buzz. A circular portal with sparks in the distance quietly opened, and Lockhart took a step out. Seeing the Kamar-Taj mages doing morning classes in the distance, he looked at them with interest. Without approaching, he found a seat nearby and sat down. Close your eyes slightly, feel the practice method of the Kamar-Taj mages, and see if there is anything worth learning from. In the future, he will have more students. If he can use similar methods to improve the efficiency of practice, why not do it? At this time, Cassilis, who was sitting in the front, also felt Lockhart's arrival. But he didn't say much, and continued to lead a group of mages to do morning lessons. This was his duty as the guardian mage of the New York Temple. In Lockhart's perception, with Cassilis as the core, a large number of mages jointly called for the power of Vishanti. When it descended into reality, it did not directly integrate into the body. Instead, under the spiritual resonance of many mages, they began to refine the descending power, extract the essence, and then distribute it according to their cultivation ratio. According to this practice, the power obtained is not only more pure, but also more in quantity. It is much better than practicing alone. This made Lockhart think of double cultivation. He quickly shook his head and excluded the distracting thoughts in his mind. This should be called joint practice, cloud practice. After a while, Cassilis slowly opened his eyes and stood up. The other mages did the same. After standing up, they bowed to Cassilis to show respect and gratitude. Cassilis also responded with a polite bow as usual. Soon, the mages dispersed, and Cassilis began to walk towards Lockhart. "Good morning, Lockhart." Cassilis sat opposite Lockhart and greeted him, and Lockhart also politely replied. Then, Cassilis looked at the empty table, stretched out his right hand wearing the ring, and shook it slightly. A small portal leading to his room quietly opened. He reached out, and a fruit plate appeared in his hand. Cassilis put it on the table. He picked up an apple from the top, handed it to Lockhart, and said with a smile, "Lockhart, you never come here for no reason. What's the matter this time?" After taking the apple, Lockhart joked, "Cassilis, can't I just sit there and chat with you when I have nothing to do?" "Haha, of course." Cassilis also said with a smile, "If you really want to chat with me, of course I welcome it. It happens that I'm quite bored staying in the New York Temple alone. How can I refuse someone to chat and discuss magic?" Afterwards, Lockhart and Cassilis chatted for a few sentences, and when they felt it was about the same, they got back to the topic. "Cassilis, my Universal Book Cafe has been successfully transformed. The environment of the book cafe has been adjusted. In the future, it will be specially used to receive mages or people with extraordinary abilities. For subsequent transactions, you are welcome to come to my Universal Book Cafe. You can also come to my book cafe when you have nothing to do. It may not be as safe as the New York Temple, but the environment is much better." Hearing what Lockhart said, Cassilis raised his eyebrows and joked, "Of course, I will come when the time comes, and you must treat me." Haha, Lockhart nodded with a smile. "Of course, you are my partner. In the future, our plan cannot be separated from you." Hearing this, Cassilis' face was also full of smiles. He could say that he was very comfortable working with Lockhart. In other words, Lockhart was very thorough in doing things. He discussed all the situations in advance, and even signed a contract to supervise. He ensured that the transaction was fair, and he was not selfish. He was very clear about how much he earned, and how much he shared. He and Maureen both felt that it was very pleasant to trade with Lockhart. There were no twists and turns, and there were some miscellaneous ideas. To describe it in one word, that is, neat and tidy. As for the benefits, they were even more grinning. In the first profit distribution a few days ago, everyone got what they wanted. And the distribution method was very fair. There was nothing that ordinary people could say. With his mind turning, Cassilis also roughly knew the purpose of Lockhart's coming here. Then he smiled and said, "Well, Lockhart, I'm in charge of the New York Temple. I can make the decision to open a portal to your Universal Book Cafe. If there are mages who want to enter the Universal Book Cafe in the future, they can go directly through the portal of the New York Temple." Hearing this, Lockhart's eyes lit up, and he quickly said, "That's great. Thank you for your trouble." After thinking about it, he asked, "By the way, Cassilis, this won't have any impact, right?" "No." Cassilis said nonchalantly, "It's just adding a teleportation point. The New York Temple has many teleportation points, so yours doesn't matter." Then, Cassilis introduced, "In fact, for most mages, they can get there through the space gate. But for some unknown locations, they still have to go through the portal of the temple to get there. I added a teleportation point to your Universal Book Cafe. To put it bluntly, it is for those mages who are here for the first time and don't know the location of your book cafe. Those who are familiar with it can open a portal by themselves to enter." Hearing this, Lockhart nodded in understanding, then snapped his fingers gently, and a pale yellow ball of light quietly emerged in the sky and floated towards Cassilis. At the same time, he introduced, "Cassilis, this is the spatial positioning information of the Universal Book Cafe. This is a free area I set up specially, and all mages can enter through the portal. After officially entering the book cafe, in order to ensure quietness and safety, I set up a space magic circle, so the portal cannot be opened." Hearing this, Cassilis smiled and said, "Lockhart, it seems that you are really attentive. When I have time, I will bring a few of my friends to your book cafe to sit and see it." At the same time, it can be regarded as a celebration for you. Hearing this, Lockhart's mouth curled up. Well, he came to the New York Temple this time for two things. The first thing is to attract traffic for his own Universal Book Cafe. In his plan, the Universal Book Cafe will play the role of a trading platform in the future. Reading books and drinking tea is only one aspect. The more important thing is that the book cafe provides an environment for mages to communicate, trade, and even cooperate. The book cafe played the role of guarantor and obtained some benefits, such as room fees, handling fees and a series of other fees. As long as the Universal Book Cafe does well in the future, it can not only accept guests from the Earth, but also Asgard and even other dimensions. This is equivalent to fleecing the entire Marvel world. It is more profitable than simply being a dealer. Not to mention, the dealer business can continue to be a feature of the Universal Book Cafe. Provide him with a steady source of income. You know, if he wants to improve his strength, he cannot do without a lot of resources. Not to mention that he has a group of students to support, all of which require resources. And now it seems that with Cassilus's ability, the Universal Book Cafe will soon be on the right track and become popular in Kamar-Taj. You know, the wizards of Kamar-Taj basically represent the main force of the entire Earth's extraordinary world. With his thoughts turning, Lockhart exchanged a few polite words with Cassilus. Then he began to talk about the second purpose of coming today. Cassilus, Morin reminded me to pay attention to the dimensional invasion before, and said that I can just contact you. Can you tell me in detail how Kamar-Taj resists dimensional invasion? Thanks to Sheng Suiug, Sunrays, Book Friend 120,806,000,000 and 1,341,791, Book Friend 202010200519168823. XSJ, Jade Emperor Mu Yunshan, Jidan Fang, Breeze, Whisper, Giant Bookworm number 1, LHC 960,310. Phantom Water Mirror, Crazy Bamboo Chewing, Xianjian Mystery Book Friend 201810301049010996. For their monthly tickets. Chapter 178 Dimensional Invasion, Dormammu, Mephisto. Dimension Invasion. Cassilus repeated, and his eyes looking at Lockhart gradually became serious. After becoming the Wizard of Kamar-Taj, he has always taken it as his responsibility to resist dimensional invasion. Especially after becoming the Guardian Wizard of the New York Temple, he was very vigilant. Because he knew very well how evil and weird some dimensions were. If you don't pay attention, not only a large number of ordinary people will die, but also wizards, and even more miserable, their souls will not be freed. Facing Lockhart's question, Cassilus said solemnly, Lockhart, since you have practiced the magic of Kamar-Taj, you are also a member of Kamar-Taj. And resisting dimensional invasion has been our responsibility for thousands of years. At this point, Cassilus paused slightly, and his voice was slightly raised, as if emphasizing something. When you became a wizard, you signed a contract just like us. Among them, you should be very clear about the second contract. Hearing this, Lockhart nodded slightly and repeated, Article 2 of the contract, the contractor is obliged to resist the invasion of the dimension, and kill the evil camp's powerful enemies and gods. Then, Lockhart said in an affirmative tone, Cassilus, don't worry, even if there is no contract, given the relationship between us, I will stand on the side of Kamar-Taj. Do your part to resist the invasion of the dimension. Hearing this, Cassilus nodded and continued, with your current strength, you can also learn more about the dimension. There are many kinds of dimensions. Most dimensions are normal, just like our Earth, stable and orderly. Even if there is chaos, it is only limited to the world. In fact, many dimensions cannot perceive other dimensions at all. But there is a kind of dimension that is different, and that is the dimension where the dimensional demon is located. At this point, Cassilus paused and said solemnly, some dimensions have masters, and the masters of the dimensions are justice, evil, and of course neutral. Like us, we belong to the justice camp with the help of Ishanti's power, while our enemies, the dimensional demons, belong to the evil camp. The dimensional demons of the evil camp are keen to invade and devour other dimensions, to increase their territory and strength. and if a dimension is devoured, there is no doubt that the creatures in that dimension will become slaves of the dimensional demons. Hearing this, Lockhart was thoughtful. He thought that according to the original plot, the future Caecilius would surrender to Dormammu of the Dark Dimension. Then, he heard Caecilius continue to say, and our Kamar-Taj is to prevent the earth from being devoured by the dimensional demons. Among the dimensional demons that are eyeing our earth, Dormammu and Mephisto are the most famous. At this point, Caecilius's face turned cold, as if he recalled something. Then, he slowly received, Lockhart, since you live in New York, you will definitely meet the believers of these two-dimensional demons in the future. The two-dimensional demons have very different ways of doing things, so you must be careful. Hearing this, Lockhart asked curiously, what exactly is it? Because of the existence of the Supreme Sorcerer, many dimensional demons, including these two, dare not approach the earth at all. At this point, there was a hint of pride in Caecilius's tone, as if he was very proud of the strength of the Supreme Sorcerer. But then, he changed the subject and said helplessly, therefore, many dimensional demons have adopted indirect means, which makes people hard to guard against. Among them, Dormammu is best at using some means to let his power descend on the earth, create believers who believe in the dark dimension, and cause chaos on the earth. And Mephisto is even more hateful. When mentioning this name, Lockhart clearly felt that Caecilius's tone became cold. Mephisto is very cunning. What he likes most is to tempt the creatures of the earth to sign a contract voluntarily and obtain their souls. Due to some rules, we don't have a suitable reason to take action directly against the voluntary creatures of the earth. What's more, because of the secrecy of the contract, many times we can't detect Mephisto's methods at all. As a result, many mages died because of Mephisto. Even the soul ran into Mephisto's hands. Speaking of this, Caecilius's face was gloomy, and his words revealed a bone-chilling coldness. When Lockhart heard this, he was also thoughtful. It seems that in the future, he will inevitably deal with these two-dimensional demons. One plays with darkness, and the other plays with souls. They are real evil existences. Especially when he thought of the current Caecilius's hostility towards the dimensional demons. And the future was actually bewitched by Dormammu. Lockhart was even more vigilant in his heart. The methods of these dimensional demons are really hard to guard against. As for the rules mentioned by Caecilius, he had also learned about them before. In his opinion, the Supreme Sorcerer actually beat all the dimensional demons around and forced them to sign an agreement that they could not take the initiative to attack. Of course, perhaps it was to leave some hope for the dimensional demons and prevent them from joining forces, or in order not to waste the mages of Kamar-Taj, to cultivate a certain sense of crisis in them. Some loopholes were created that were not loopholes. Although on the surface it was said that they could not take action due to some rules, if they really wanted to find excuses, they would find them everywhere. Like him, Lockhart, if he really wanted to find excuses, he would have a lot of them. As the saying goes, to deal with such evil demons, there is no need to talk about the code of conduct, and everyone should fight together. Thoughts turned, Lockhart nodded lightly, and said in a deep voice, don't worry, Caecilius, I will be more careful next time. Then, he changed the subject, and asked a more curious question. Caecilius, ask, why did Morin emphasize that I would encounter these invaders in New York? Won't they avoid the three major temples? If it were me, I would leave here as soon as possible. In response to Lockhart's question, Caecilius explained, because of the existence of the three major temples. Why did the three major temples choose New York, London, and Hong Kong? It's because these 3 points are the weak points of space on our Earth. The vicinity of the temple is the best choice for the invasion of dimensional demons. They can deploy relatively complete forces. If they are in other places, the deployed forces will be very small, or even have little impact at all, unless they come in with a clone. And, for believers like Dormammu, they want to call their master. It will be easier in the city, where the three major temples are located. If they change to other places, because of the stability of the space and other aspects, the consumption will be very large, and the probability of success is not high. So, in the future in New York, you will definitely meet believers of Dormammu and the subordinates of demons from other dimensions. Hearing this, Lockhart felt something strange. Generally speaking, the location of the 3 holy temples should be the safest. Why did it feel like the 3 holy places mentioned by Cassilis seemed to be the source of danger? Could it be that the Supreme Sorcerer deliberately arranged it, limiting the battlefield to a certain area to prevent the impact from expanding, and at the same time training the mages of Kamar-Taj? Although this method is not very clever, it is still effective. Thinking of the seemingly indifferent and inactive temperament of the Ancient One, Lockhart felt more and more that it was deliberately arranged by the Ancient One. While Lockhart was thinking, suddenly, a portal with sparks quietly opened next to Cassilis. Then, a Kamar-Taj wizard wearing a dark yellow wizard's uniform came out, glanced at Lockhart, walked to Cassilis, and whispered in his ear. Seeing this, Lockhart did not continue to ask, and then looked at the 2 people talking with interest. Only then did he realize that Cassilis's expression had changed a little. But maybe it was due to magic or special conversation skills. He didn't hear any sound. Soon, the wizard who delivered the message left. And Cassilis, a smile appeared on his face, as if a fox saw the pride of an old hen. Then, he smiled to Lockhart. Lockhart, didn't you want to know about the dimensional invasion just now? It just so happened that the detection wizard of Kamar-Taj sent a message just now. A Dormammu follower was found. Do you want to join the hunting operation? Chapter 179 Cassilis's tough attitude. Hunting operation? Hearing Cassilis's evaluation of this operation, Lockhart thought for a moment, then nodded and agreed. Okay, it's a good opportunity to see how you capture Dormammu's followers. If we encounter them in the future, we can take action in time. Hearing Lockhart's affirmative answer, Cassilis nodded slightly, thought about it, reached out again, shook the hanging ring slightly, and opened a small portal. Reaching through the portal, he took out a small compass from his desk and handed it to Lockhart. At the same time, he introduced, by the way, Lockhart, this compass is the equipment I used to capture the invasion of different dimensions. The effect is very simple, that is, it can detect the breadth of different dimensions. For the wizards who have just participated in the capture operation, they will carry similar tools. You can use this one. After Lockhart took it, he looked at it for a few times, input a certain amount of magic power, watched the needle on the compass keep turning, and watched the runes glowing, and based on the runes, he roughly judged its function and operating principle. Soon, he understood a thing or two, so Lockhart put it away directly and thanked him. Okay, then I'll trouble you this time. Then, he said eagerly, Cassilis, when will we act? Apart from himself, this is the first time he will meet an enemy from another dimension, and it is a well-known Dormammu believer, which makes him feel a little excited. As if knowing Lockhart's expectations, Cassilis smiled, looked at the clock in the distance and roughly estimated, and said, I asked the wizard just now to notify others. It is estimated that the hunting team of the New York Temple will gather in 10 minutes. The wizards in this operation, like you, are all in contact for the first time. It's not easy to meet such a newly born Dormammu believer. It's perfect to use him to practice and use him as a case. Hearing this, Lockhart looked a little strange. Why did he feel inexplicably that Cassilis seemed to be pulling him along this time, just to take care of this group of newcomers? Sure enough, Lockhart, if these newcomers are in danger, remember to act in time. They are a good batch of seedlings. In response, Lockhart could only nod silently. This experience of being a worker made him feel inexplicably wonderful. New York Temple, Magic Practice Room. Cassilis stood at the front, looking at the 7 novice mages in front of him with a serious face. And Lockhart, standing next to Cassilis, looked at everyone with interest. Mages, since you are here, you have the corresponding psychological preparation. I won't say anything else. This time, it's a rare opportunity. You will hunt down Dormammu's followers according to your training in Kamar-Taj. Master Lockhart and I will watch over you. We won't act easily, unless there is life-threatening danger. Did you hear that clearly? Cassilis shouted loudly and seriously. I heard it clearly, Instructor. The 7 new mages in front of him replied in unison. The voices were not only loud, but also full of excitement, which made Lockhart look sideways. How come this group of rookie mages seemed to be more excited than himself when they saw the enemy? It seems that the training of Kamar-Taj was still in place. As his thoughts turned, He heard Cassilis say loudly, "Okay, this operation will be led by Captain John. All actions must be under his command." Then, Lockhart saw this group of rookie captains, Master John, come out, stand in front of everyone, and begin to introduce the operation. Lockhart was listening nearby. It was the first time he saw such a formal hunting operation. Although they were all rookies, it was precisely because they were rookies that they would act completely according to the process of training in Kamar-Taj. This would open Lockhart's eyes and let him learn from the experience 3 minutes later. "Instructor, we are ready and can act at any time." Master John stood in front of Cassilis and said in awe. This group of mages had been taught by Cassilis before. They knew that this instructor had a tough personality and would never let go of the target he had identified. Once he said something, it was like water spilled, and it was difficult to regret it. Since he said that he would not attack unless there was a life-threatening situation, then even if everyone was seriously injured, as long as there was no life-threatening situation, he might not attack. However, John stole a glance at Master Lockhart next to him. He had heard of Master Lockhart recently. He seemed to have a lot of good things in his hands, and was quite generous. I wonder what his personality was like. Lockhart smiled and nodded slightly when he saw John's gaze. Instantly, John felt a little relieved. Cassilis knew about this scene, but he did not say anything. Didn't he pull Lockhart in just in case? Such a good fighting force would be wasted. In short, given the relationship between the two, this was not a big deal, and it just happened to solve Lockhart's doubts, so why not do it? Okay, start the action. Cassilis gave an order. All the mages, including Lockhart, slightly swiped the rings in their hands, opened a portal, stepped in, and entered the destination. Queens, New York. On the green lawn, there was a small garden covered with various flowers. However, there was something strange. The originally bright flowers seemed to be a little yellow, or to be more precise, they were a little withered. And next to the garden, on the last path, if you walk a few more steps along the path, you can see a villa. At this time, except for the slight sound of the breeze, there was silence. Staying here, you can vaguely feel a cool feeling. It formed a sharp contrast with the scorching sunlight emitted by the scorching sun in the sky. At this moment, suddenly, several circular portals with sparks opened. A group of several wizards walked out. Lockhart and Cassilis stood behind them, watching the 7 members of the hunting team gathered in front of them. Cassilis, if someone gets hurt later, are you sure you won't take action? Lockhart joked. Of course. Cassilis nodded and said coldly, which wizard won't get hurt? Getting hurt should be the standard for wizards. As long as they don't die, I will never take action. What they need now is training and developing combat experience. They can't just keep training. They must experience actual combat. Only after they have truly experienced the feeling of death can they transform like a warrior and truly play a role in the battlefield against dimensional invasion in the future. I don't want the wizards I train to be a bunch of softies. Feeling Cassilis' tough attitude, Lockhart thought about it. Indeed, without actual combat, just training will not make a talent. Only after truly experiencing life and death can a transformation occur. Cassilis treated this group of new wizards too much, which reminded him of his 3 outstanding students. With his mind turning, Lockhart secretly made a decision. Then Buzz, the hunting team leader, Wizard John, held the hanging ring in his hand, drew a perfect circle with both hands, and pulled it outward from the middle. As the magic flowed, lines of red flames appeared in the air, forming a circular rune pattern with a very complex internal structure. Then, John pushed hard, and the red flame rune light quickly spread around, covering the entire villa. Kamar-Taj spell, Ring of Augustus. Chapter 180 Shattered Space, Dark Power, Ring of Augurius. This is a standard Kamar-Taj battle magic. After covering an area, outsiders will actively avoid the current area, and it is difficult for people inside to leave. It belongs to the category of space magic, and it is most suitable for constructing a battlefield. After sensing the spatial fluctuations around him, Lockhart nodded slightly, and looked at the hunting team heading towards the villa. Then, Cassilis next to him swiped the hanging ring, stretched out his hand and waved it, and a transparent ripple slowly spread, covering the 2 people, and hiding their bodies. Let's go, Lockhart. See what this Dormammu believer is doing? I hope we don't take action this time. Sensing the dark energy emerging from the villa, Caecilius said indifferently. Lockhart nodded and followed Caecilius to the villa. Soon, Lockhart saw the door of the villa that had been opened and went in directly. Looking at the living room, that was clean to a little weird, and the quiet environment. Caecilius's face changed, and he immediately said, Lockhart, be ready to take action at any time. This may be a trap. He didn't even sense the breath of the team walking just now. How is this possible? He saw them come in with his own eyes. Lockhart heard it, and was a little confused, but he also clenched his wand in his hand and acted alert. Caecilius, what's the matter? Aren't John and the others upstairs? In Lockhart's feeling, the life breath of John and his group was upstairs. Be alert, we may have entered another space, don't be misled. Caecilius waved his hand, and a large amount of magic power gradually condensed, forming two short sticks of red flame in his hands. Then, he explained very quickly, there is no breath of John and his group walking here. Based on my experience, either we have reached another space, or they have reached another space, otherwise it would not be like this. While speaking, Caecilius picked up two short sticks with both hands and intertwined them, making a fighting gesture. When Lockhart heard it, he quickly waved his wand, and a transparent wave quickly spread. Detect life. Feeling the feedback information, Lockhart's face changed, no life. In an instant, the alarm bells in his heart rang loudly, and his eyes looking around were full of vigilance. I thought it would be a good show, but I didn't expect that I would become a character in the show before I even finished watching it. Then, Lockhart saw Caecilius connect two short sticks together. He held a long stick tightly with both hands and poked it hard on the floor. Bang! In an instant, with the fierce collision between the long stick and the floor, a large number of red flame-colored patterns appeared on the ground, forming a strange rune pattern. Then, Caecilius twisted the long stick hard, and the rune pattern exploded and spread around. Lockhart could clearly see that the space around him was distorted, and he could vaguely see a blood-red living room. But soon, the space seemed to return to normal. Seeing this, Lockhart immediately waved his wand, and a large amount of magic power flowed from his arm into the wand. The tip of the wand instantly emitted a dazzling white light, and at the same time shot out in all directions. The space was broken. In an instant, the space distortion that seemed to be calming down began to distort further. Crack. Faintly, the sound of space breaking could be heard. Seeing this, Caecilius on the side was delighted. But at the same time, an evil, dark energy began to spread from all sides to Lockhart and Caecilius in the middle, as if to engulf the two. Caecilius snorted coldly, wrapped his hands around his chest, made a strange gesture, and slowly turned. At the same time, a red flame rune pattern suddenly appeared in front of Caecilius, emitting powerful magic fluctuations. With his hands suddenly closed, the rune pattern suddenly compressed into a ball of light. Then, Caecilius opened his palm, controlled the ball of light in his hand, and pushed hard towards the dark power. Zizzy. With the sound of space shattering, Lockhart and Caecilius disappeared quietly. Time went back 10 minutes. Click. John, the captain of the team, pushed open the door of the villa. Looking at the broken furniture, glass fragments, and pools of blood on the walls and floors. With a flash of caution in his eyes, he entered the living room carefully, and the team members behind him followed closely. At the same time, everyone drew a short stick from their waists, infused magic power, and the lines on the surface of the short stick gradually lit up, showing a red flame color. John raised the short stick, and made a fighting posture. Then he looked at the team members who came in behind, nodded slightly, and gave a look. One of the wizards came out, waved the hanging ring in his hand, and moved his hands. Soon a strange rune pattern appeared in front of him. The wizard pushed forward lightly, and the rune pattern instantly rushed forward and spread around. It kept flashing, but there was nothing unusual. Soon, the mage said, "Captain, there is nothing unusual in the living room, but there seems to be a dark energy upstairs." After hearing this, John nodded slightly, made a gesture to the people behind him, and walked towards the stairs. Holding a short stick in front of his chest, he kept a fighting posture at all times. John stepped on the stairs, and every time he took a step, he would try his best to control the strength to prevent any sound from spreading and waking up the enemies above. The team members behind him did the same. When everyone reached the middle of the stairs, suddenly, bang, buzz, a figure in a black robe appeared from the top of the stairs and saw everyone below. Seeing everyone below, he didn't say a word and just waved his hand. In an instant, a large number of pitch black diamond-shaped spikes appeared in the air, emitting evil, dark energy fluctuations. Rushing down. John, who was walking in the front, saw this scene and shouted loudly, "Defense, Shield of Scala." At the same time, holding the hanging ring, his hand slid, outlining a circular trajectory. In an instant, red lines appeared in the air, and they continued to combine, and a red flame shield appeared in front of John. Bang, 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 crack. The dark spikes shot from above collided with the shield, making a series of bangs, but accompanied by a large number of attacks from the opponent. Soon, the red flame shield faintly made a cracking sound, and some black cracks on the surface of the shield were visible to the naked eye. At the same time, the original red flame shield began to gradually turn black, as if it was infected. This made John's face gloomy. But then bang, 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 in front of John, 6 red flame Scala shields appeared at the same time, combining to form a huge shield. Continue to block the attack of the dark spikes above. With the sound of the spikes and the shield colliding violently, John let out a breath. Immediately cancel your shield and quickly expel the erosion of the dark power. Being eroded by the dark power is not a joke. It is too easy to get into trouble. The black-robed man upstairs saw this scene and knew that the attack would not work. He flashed and walked towards the next room. Soon, as the dark spikes completely disappeared, everyone slowly cancelled the Shield of Scala. At this time, John glanced at the hall behind. Although he could not see the figure, he was slightly reassured. The instructor and Master Lockhart were watching from behind, so nothing should happen. At most, he would be injured. With his mind turning, he made a gesture to the wizard behind him and continued to move forward, ready to chase the enemy just now. Chapter 181. The Kamar-Taj mages destroyed. Step. John walked up to the second floor, and there was a slight sound of footsteps. However, he frowned, and he saw that the wooden door of the room at the second staircase had been tightly closed. Thinking of the black-robed man just now, his heart was alarmed, fearing that he would encounter a trap again. Then he raised his right hand, and with a thought, a stream of magic power flowed into the hanging ring. Buzz! A red flame-colored fireball suddenly appeared above his palm, emitting hot energy. But John obviously didn't care. Seeing the wooden door in front of him, he directly stretched out his hand and waved, controlling the fireball to shoot at the wooden door. Boom. In a flash, the fireball hit the wooden door, and the wooden door exploded instantly. Looking at the room inside, which was dim because of the large curtains, he gently waved his hand, and the curtains were retracted on both sides. The bright sunlight shone through the glass into the room. The originally dim room became very bright. But in John's eyes, this was just a study. Except for the broken door, fragments on the floor, there was no one inside. It was as if the black-robed man just now had not entered. John, why don't we go in and look for it again? There must be traces. After all, the space was sealed before, and he couldn't leave through space means. Hearing Master Yuno's reminder, John nodded. He strode in and looked around the study and found nothing unusual. Thinking about it, he said to the mage behind him, "Mitchell, you are best at detecting spells. Come and see if there are any abnormal traces." Mage Mitchell nodded, closed his eyes slightly, and sensed in detail. With the surge of magic power, he held the hanging ring in his right hand and swept it lightly. A large piece of sparks quietly emerged from his hand, dissipated around, and enveloped the entire study. John and the other mages gradually waited for the test results. Soon, Mitchell walked to the middle of the study, stepped on a piece of floor in the middle, and said, "There is a dense dark energy here. The other party should have left from this location. It is very likely that they will directly shuttle through the floor and move downwards. I guess the other party may be in the basement. According to the layout of the villa, there is a basement below." Hearing Mitchell's analysis, John hesitated. He felt a little headache. He encountered such a complicated thing for the first time on a mission. It would be better to have a big battle directly. It would be more comfortable. He originally planned to walk through the whole villa first to prevent accidents. But Mitchell's analysis was not unreasonable. When he thought of the instructor and Lockhart following behind, John said to everyone, "Let's split into 2 groups. 2 people will follow me to the basement, and the other 4 people will explore the environment of the villa to prevent accidents. If there is any abnormality, send a signal directly, don't act rashly." The mages looked at each other. Although they felt that it was inappropriate to split up, John was the captain after all, and he still had to listen to orders. So they discussed it slightly and split into 2 groups. Mitchell and Yuno stood in front of John, and the other 4 mages stood opposite. The 2 sides looked at each other and separated directly. The 4 mages walked up the stairs to other rooms above, while John took the 2 mages downstairs to the living room and prepared to enter the basement. After returning to the living room, they walked towards a small room deep in the living room. After entering the small room, they looked at the iron door of the basement on the floor that was locked tightly with chains. John frowned. Even if he could shuttle objects, he wouldn't lock the door. After thinking about it, he waved his hand gently, and a blade of light fell quietly. Bang! The chain broke directly, making a crisp sound. John directly opened the iron door on the floor and looked at the deep, dark stairs below. There was a slight sound, and a ball of light quietly emerged and fell into the basement below. After a slight perception, he found that there was indeed a dark atmosphere inside, but it was very weak and didn't look like it had been lived in for a long time. He hurriedly walked into the stairs and looked at the basement full of debris. There was no sign that anyone had been there. As if he had thought of something, he secretly said that it was not good. "Let's go and find Angus and the others," John said quickly. His face was a little bad. Mitchell and Yuno nodded quickly after hearing this. They both had a bad feeling in their hearts. Step, step, step. The 3 of them walked up the stairs very quickly, passing the 2nd floor and heading to the 3rd floor. At the same time, the lines on the surface of the short sticks in the hands of the 3 people had already emitted a faint orange-red light, as if they were ready to fight at any time. Looking around the rooms on the 3rd floor, there was still no one. Walking to the 4th floor, which was the rooftop. After reaching the rooftop, John's eyes condensed, and his hands tightly grasped the short stick in his hands. On the rooftop, an altar was placed in the middle, and around the altar, there were a lot of corpses. A man in a black robe half knelt opposite the altar, constantly chanting, emitting a strong dark power. And the 4 mages were also placed on the altar, and they were very conspicuous. John could clearly see the desperate faces of the 4 teammates. Then, with anger rising wildly, holding the short sticks, he rushed directly. The 2 mages behind him did the same, and the anger in their eyes could no longer be stopped. This was the body of their friend, placed on the altar. Result: buzz, buzz, buzz. The 3 had just run a few steps when suddenly, the environment changed instantly, and a strong buzzing sound rang around them. They instantly felt dizzy and wanted to cast magic, but found that their hands were uncoordinated and even a little weak, and they couldn't cast magic at all. With bloodshot eyes, he collapsed on the ground, struggling or squirming constantly. Then, the scene changed instantly, and the so-called altar and the so-called corpse disappeared. The teammate who had died had already appeared, and like him, he fell to the ground and struggled and squirmed constantly. John instantly understood that everything just now was an illusion. They stepped into a trap. But it was too late. He could only stare at the black-robed man not far away with his bloodshot eyes, watching the other party wearing a thick pair of headphones that tightly covered his ears. "You are the mages of Kamar-Taj that my lord mentioned." The black-robed man walked up to the 7 mages and said in a light tone, "You don't look very smart. When provoked, you rush over like a reckless man." At this point, the black-robed man straightened John's limp body and gently slapped John's face. "Pa. Pa. Pa." John glared at him, wishing that a ball of fire would come out of his eyes and burn the other person to death. But unfortunately, the buzzing sound continued, and the body remained limp. The black-robed man continued to taunt John. "My lord also told me to be careful of the mages of Kamar-Taj. It seems that I was too careful." As he said that, the black-robed man picked up John's right hand and took off the ring in his hand. He put it in front of John, waved it as if to show off, and then took it back. This made John feel a little desperate. The magic ring was taken away by someone. How could he fight? Looking at John's expression, the black-robed man felt a little bored, so he turned around and left, and walked to the two mages Mitchell and Yuno. He also took off their rings. He took out 7 rings from the pocket of his black robe, all in his hand. Seeing this, the man in black robe nodded with satisfaction. This is a good thing. If you sacrifice this iconic item of Kamar-Taj to the master, you will get a lot of rewards. Immediately, he set his sights on the 7 people lying on the ground, with a hint of greed in his eyes. My lord needs sacrifices, and the best sacrifice is the magician of Kamar-Taj. I hope that my lord's reward can refine the 2 magicians into puppets, or if not, trap them so that I can successfully sacrifice myself. While thinking, the man in black robe touched the thick headphones on his ears, with a sarcastic smile on his face. What era is this? And we are still playing ancient melee combat. Do you understand modern technology? Thanks to Wheel Shoes, book friend 2018071007394448, and you for the monthly votes. Chapter 182 Infrasonic Weapons, Smart Villains. Whoosh. The black-robed man of Dormammu's followers looked at the 7 people lying on the ground, waved his hand, and in an instant, a large number of ropes with black light appeared, and with a whoosh, the 7 people were tied up. Then, the black-robed man waved his hand gently, and the 7 bound mages floated in the air. As the black-robed man walked towards the rooftop, the 7 floating mages followed closely behind. Soon, the black-robed man walked about 10 meters, pressed a button, and took off his thick headphones. At the same time, John and others also noticed that the buzzing sound in their ears disappeared, and their bodies began to slowly recover their strength. They began to struggle, but unfortunately, the ring was taken away, and their bodies were still tied up, so they had no resistance at all. Damn it, you bastard, Kamar-Taj woo. John, who had just recovered some strength, just cursed a few words, and the black-robed man didn't even turn his head and gently raised his hand. In an instant, a glimmer of light flashed, and all the mages' mouths seemed to be glued shut, and they could only woo. Soon, the 7 mages floating in the air saw a large number of black lines appearing on the ground, forming a strange pattern. To be precise, it was a magic circle of sacrifice. This made the 7 mages of Kamar-Taj pale, and their eyes revealed fear. They had learned that this kind of sacrificial formation was equivalent to sacrificing their souls to Dormammu. At that time, they really could not live or die. Woo. In an instant, all the mages wooed loudly, and struggled with all their might. They did not forget that the instructor and the magician Lockhart were behind them. This was a life and death crisis. If they did not show up at this time, something would really happen. The black cannon man in front heard the continuous wooing behind him and felt a little annoyed. But looking at the sacrificial formation carved in front of him, he waved again, and the 7 mages floating in the air fell into the core position of the magic circle. This made the mages even more terrified. They encountered such a thing on their first mission. Woo. Instructor, come quickly, or someone will die. For a moment, the mages struggled hard, kept shouting, and made a lot of humming noises. After hearing this, the black-robed man showed a mocking smile on his face and shouted, "Don't shout, no one is coming to save you. The 2 powerful mages have been trapped. Maybe you can see them later." Then, the black-robed man added in a rather bad tone, "in the form of dark puppets." After hearing this, Mage John's head was suddenly covered. The instructor was trapped. How could this be possible? Wouldn't they be finished? Then woo woo woo. The instructor must be fine. He is just trapped. Calm down and find a way to survive. John, who reacted, shouted immediately, reminding everyone to stay calm. Unfortunately, most mages don't have the same psychological quality as him. Some mages felt desperate, and some, although not desperate, were not much better. Suddenly, the black-robed man froze, frowned, and his face was gloomy. He felt that the treasure given by the master was broken. At this moment, John also noticed the change in the black-robed man's expression and shouted immediately, "Woo woo woo. The instructor is coming. The instructor is coming." The wizard next to him also understood what John meant, and there was hope in his eyes. The black-robed man saw the changes in the crowd, and a cold arc appeared at the corner of his mouth. He waved his hand to release magic power, blocking the mouths of all the wizards, and knocking them unconscious at the same time, to prevent them from causing trouble. As a villain, He is very self-aware. It is enough to say a few nonsense. If you say too much, it is easy to get into trouble. Doing things is important. Then press the button in your hand to activate the infrasonic weapon again. At the same time, sit cross-legged in front of the sacrificial formation. Start to recite the prayer spell silently. He doesn't believe that this group of Malay wizards who only know how to fight can understand such cutting-edge technology. Even if the other party can resist, but as long as they can delay for a while, they will leave immediately after the sacrifice. Of course, he did not directly cast the illusion this time. If the other party sees it, it will be more troublesome. The space is broken. Lockhart and Cassilis appeared in the living room again. This time, the living room was full of brown-red bloodstains, as if there had been a massacre before. Seeing this scene, Lockhart frowned, and Cassilis stuck a glance and directly released his mental power to quickly sense the breath of the new wizard. This is a group of students he is very optimistic about. Nothing must happen. Then Cassilis slightly turned his head to look at the basement, where he had just sensed John's breath. But soon, he forgot about it again in the direction of the stairs. "Let's go," Cassilis said with his head tilted, and ran directly towards the stairs. Lockhart followed closely behind, with a bad premonition. Tap, tap, tap. The two stepped on the stairs quickly, and the sound of rapid footsteps sounded, which seemed very hurried. It was easy to pass by the second floor, take a glance, and go directly to the third floor. Looking again, I found that there was no useful information, so I went directly to the rooftop on the fourth floor. Lockhart looked at the empty house around him, as if it had not been lived in for a long time, and thought about it. Soon, the two went directly to the rooftop. At a glance, a man in a black robe was found sitting cross-legged in front of Magic Circle. All the mages were unconscious, and placed in the middle. Cassilis looked gloomy. How could he not know that this was a sacrificial formation of Dormammu's followers? Without thinking, he waved the hanging ring and a magic shield emerged. At the same time, he held a long stick and prepared to rush over. Suddenly, snap. "Cassilis, calm down." Lockhart grabbed Cassilis' arm and said quickly, "There is a problem. There must be a trap. The other party trapped them all just now, and now they are blatantly sacrificing in front of him. There must be something wrong. Don't be trapped again. If the other party succeeds in sacrificing, it will be troublesome." The calm Lockhart thought of it in an instant. At the same time, he let go of his perception and frowned. In addition to the large amount of energy fluctuations, it seems that there is a machine operating. In an instant, Lockhart complained in his heart that he, a mage, had not played with technology, but the other party, a follower of the evil god, had already started playing with technology. He said, how could 7 wizards not be able to defeat even one evil god believer? Damn, they actually fell into a trap of technological weapons. Cassilis was a little puzzled after being pulled by Lockhart. In his perception, there seemed to be no traps here, only the dark energy that continued to emerge from the opposite side, and it seemed that the sacrifice was about to succeed. As for the so-called machine, he sensed it, but skipped it directly. He didn't have a detailed understanding of technological items like Lockhart. At most, he just went online and played with his mobile phone. He even felt that the thing looked similar to an air conditioner, with a speaker-like thing on it at most. Cassilis, there is a trap. I'll do it. After saying that, Lockhart pulled Cassilis behind him and reminded him, get ready to close your eyes. Then, Lockhart contacted the contract. Soon, a small snake crawled out of his arm, landed on the ground, and continued to expand its body. It was the basilisk. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 183, Dormammu's Followers' Complaints. Crack, crack, crack. The slender basilisk expanded rapidly at a speed visible to the naked eye, pressing cracks on the rooftop and making cracking sounds. After seeing the huge body of the basilisk, Cassilis showed a look of astonishment on his face. Then, he heard Lockhart remind him again, Cassilis, close your eyes quickly, and do as I say. Open your eyes when I say. Cassilis was a little puzzled, but he still did it out of trust in Lockhart. After seeing Cassilis close his eyes, Lockhart exhaled lightly, waved his wand lightly, and controlled the basilisk's invisible lens back to his hand. At the same time, he also began to close his eyes, and began to contact the basilisk through the contract. He was not stupid. It was obvious that this Dormammu believer had extraordinary means. Even technological weapons were played out. You said there was no problem in the middle. Is it possible? The thought flashed through his mind, and he began to control the basilisk to attack through the contract. Roar. The basilisk, which had recovered its original body, roared excitedly. It was still the most comfortable to have a normal body. Then, he felt the information emerging in his mind. He turned his head slightly and looked at the machine not far away. Roar. The basilisk roared again, swung his huge snake tail hard, and slapped the infrasonic weapon. Snap. Bang. In an instant, the infrasonic machine was slapped hard by the huge snake tail and broke into pieces. The black-robed man who sensed this scene looked a little ugly. The current mage is so wild, not only close combat, but also a summoner. Is this still a mage? The information given by the master can't be wrong, right? Thinking of the information about the Kamar-Taj mage, provided by his master Dormammu, the black-robed man compared the impression of the mage in his past memory. The corners of his mouth twitched involuntarily. He thought that the Malay mage was outrageous enough, but he didn't expect that the current mage not only didn't cast magic, but also directly summoned pets. With a flash of thought, the black-robed man, a Dormammu follower, began to speed up the sacrifice, ignoring the basilisk behind him. Because under Lockhart's command, the basilisk quickly swam to the vicinity of the black-robed man, and began to swing its huge snake tail. It smashed directly at the black-robed man, who was playing with the plate. Bang, bang, bang. In an instant, a protective shield with black ripples appeared, and the snake's tail violently hit the protective shield, making a loud noise. However, the protective shield showed no signs of damage. Roar. Seeing that the attack failed, the basilisk roared again, as if a little dissatisfied. Then, it looked at the semicircular protective shield in front of it. It began to swim nearby, and circled around the protective shield. It completely wrapped the protective shield with its huge body, and squeezed the protective shield with force. At the same time, its eyes were fixed on the black-robed man in front of it who was bowing his head and meditating silently. Crack. The huge squeezing force made the protective shield crack with a crackling sound. The black-robed man tensed up all over, but he knew that no matter what he did now, it would be useless. The only way to survive was to successfully sacrifice. So he continued to speed up his speech and pray for Dormammu to come. Roar. Seeing that the man in black robe had no reaction, the basilisk roared again, opened its bloody mouth, exposed its sharp fangs, and began to slowly ooze out drops of venom. Zzz. The venom of the basilisk is not only highly toxic, but also has a strong ability to break magic. It can even quickly destroy Voldemort's Horcrux, a top magic item. And a mere defense shield can hardly hinder it. In an instant, the venom passed through the defense shield, and flowed on the ground. There was a sizzling erosion sound on the ground. At this moment, the man in black robe could no longer bear it. He saw with his own eyes that the black venom on the ground was like sulfuric acid, constantly eroding the lines of the sacrificial magic circle. Especially thinking about the venom dripping on his body. Thinking of this, the man in black robe quickly left the ground, while continuing to chant the sacrificial spell. He looked up, trying to avoid the possible venom attack. Then he saw a pair of huge yellow eyes. Then, it was dark, and he lost consciousness. Through the contract, Lockhart saw the petrified man in black robe through the basilisk's sight. He was closing his eyes, and the corners of his mouth curled up. Then, he waved his wand, and controlled the invisible lens to merge into the basilisk's eyes again. Cassilis, you can open your eyes now. Lockhart's voice came to his ears, and Cassilis slowly opened his eyes. He had just heard a few roars, and knew that it might be the giant snake summoned by Lockhart. Although he wanted to open his eyes, and observe what was going on, he did so, because of Lockhart's reminder and his trust in him. Especially now that he was on the battlefield, he was not stupid enough to disobey his comrades' reminders. So he kept his eyes closed. When he opened his eyes, There were cracks everywhere on the ground of the rooftop, as if it was under severe pressure. Not far to his left, a pile of debris fell on the ground. And at the location of the magic circle that was originally sacrificed to Dormammu, the huge giant snake was entangled with a protective shield, constantly squeezing it hard. He could even vaguely hear the cracking sound of the protective shield. Then, Lockhart's voice came to his ears again. "Cassilis, let's go. The enemy has been controlled by the little snake." As he said that, Lockhart walked towards the basilisk, and Cassilis followed closely behind. At the same time, he kept looking at the giant snake that Lockhart had replaced. When he thought of the little snake that Lockhart had just caught, the corners of his mouth twitched. He walked in front of it and looked at the crystal clear, jade-like dark green scales that appeared on the huge body of the basilisk, as well as the strange patterns on the surface of the scales. Instantly, he knew that this giant snake might have a very strong anti-magic ability. He couldn't help but look at Lockhart again. He really wanted to know how Lockhart subdued such a giant snake. He felt that he might not be able to beat it. Just as he was about to ask, bang, as the basilisk used its huge body to continuously squeeze the defense shield. The sound of the defense shield constantly breaking reached the ears of Lockhart and Cassilis. And finally, with a loud bang, the defense shield was completely broken and disappeared completely. Looking at the disappeared defense shield, Lockhart called on the basilisk to leave. Soon, the basilisk swam to the side of Lockhart, revealing the 7 wizards lying unconscious on the ground in the middle, and the black-robed man who was petrified, looking up and motionless. Seeing this scene, Cassilis raised his head and looked at the basilisk standing next to Lockhart, looking up and looking forward, constantly extending his snake tongue and hissing, thinking about something. But then, looking at the 7 wizards lying on the ground, unconscious, Cassilis snorted coldly with a dark face. He felt that this group of wizards really embarrassed him. Seeing this, Lockhart looked at Cassilis's face with interest, and then waved his wand directly. Clear spring-like water. In an instant, a large number of water drops appeared in the air, pouring on the faces of the 7 wizards, waking them up. Chapter 184 Coulson's Troubles. Darkness. Drop, drop, drop. Master John, who was completely unconscious, slowly felt something slapping on his face, and heard a dripping sound in his ears. It felt familiar, but he couldn't remember what it was. Trying to recall, oh, it's water. When John thought of water, his consciousness quickly recovered, and he subconsciously opened his mouth, feeling the sweet water dripping in his mouth, and swallowed subconsciously. At the same time, the past scenes in his mind quickly emerged. Bloody living room, rooftop, black-robed man, hanging ring, sacrificial formation snap. John's sense of touch quickly recovered, feeling the cold ground and the water dripping on his body, and tried to open his eyelids. Instructor. A familiar face came into view, and John shouted subconsciously, his voice hoarse. Then, as if he had thought of something, he quickly looked back, and looked at his companions lying unconscious on the ground next to him. He was relieved instantly, at least no one was dead. Then, he saw the motionless black-robed man and a huge python. He shuddered subconsciously, and quickly turned to Cassilis and said, "Instructor, snake." What he didn't expect was, "Humph." Cassilis snorted coldly and said, "That's your savior. Go thank me one by one later." At the same time, the other wizards also slowly woke up. Looking at the stiff black-robed man and the huge snake monster, the shock in their eyes gradually turned into surprise and relief. At this time, Lockhart, watching all the wizards wake up, retracted the spell, and waved his wand again. Accompanied by a transparent ripple covering the 7 wizards, the moisture on their bodies, including hair, clothes, etc., was all dried. At the same time, stains, dust, etc. also disappeared quietly. Feeling the changes in their bodies, all the mages said, "Thank you, Master Lockhart." Then, looking at the instructor next to them, they also hurriedly said, "Thank you, Instructor. Do you have brains on your heads?" At this moment, Cassilis said with a cold face, "You knew there was a problem, but you separated." Then, he said to John, "John, what are you thinking? This time, if it weren't for Master Lockhart, your souls would have fallen into Dormammu's hands." At the end, Cassilis was a little softer, and there was a trace of relief in his heart. If all these mages were sacrificed, he would not know how to explain to other mages later. John and others lowered their heads and were speechless, not knowing how to respond. Originally, they thought there were instructors and Master Lockhart behind them, but who would have thought that the other party would not play by the rules? Instead of fighting directly, they set a trap, and they were all like idiots and went in. Looking at the expressions of John and others, Cassilis said a few more words with a cold face. He turned to Lockhart and said gratefully, "Thank you for your trouble this time, Lockhart." He had just sensed the strength of the shield. If it hadn't been for the basilisk strangling and breaking the shield, he would have had to spend a lot of effort to break it. By then, the black-robed man would have been successfully sacrificed. By then, even if he killed the other party, it would be meaningless. After all, the wizard's soul had already run into Dormammu's hands. After hearing this, Lockhart smiled and said, "This is what I should do. I hope nothing unexpected happens." As he spoke, Lockhart waved his wand lightly, and the 7 rings in the black-robed man's pocket floated in the air, and then flew into the hands of each wizard. The 7 wizards received their own rings, and quickly put them on their hands, feeling the resonance of magic and the rings, and a sense of relief or security appeared on their faces. Especially John, he saw his ring being taken away with his own eyes, and the feeling of powerlessness left a deep impression on him. After seeing this, Caecilius immediately reminded, "Why don't you thank Master Lockhart? If it weren't for his pet, you would have been with Dormammu long ago." "Thank you, Master Lockhart. Thank you, Master Lockhart." John and other mages hurriedly thanked. Then, looking at the huge yellow eyes next to him, and the serpent monster that kept extending its tongue and hissing, he hesitated for a moment, thinking of what his instructor had just said, and hurriedly bowed to the other party and thanked him. "Thank you, Mr. Giant Snake. Thank you." Seeing this, Caecilius nodded slightly, and then began to scold. "I have repeatedly emphasized that in the face of any situation, you must be very vigilant. Especially when you are not completely sure. Don't separate, otherwise." Lockhart then looked at the scene of Caecilius scolding the mage with interest. Recalling his apprentice, he was thoughtful. After thinking for a while, he directly called the serpent monster to shrink its body. Soon, under the gaze of Caecilius, John and others, the originally huge serpent monster shrank at a speed visible to the naked eye. Finally, it climbed onto Lockhart's arm and wrapped around his arm like a bracelet. John and the others were very surprised when they saw this. It was the first time they saw such a magical creature that could shrink its huge body to the size of a bracelet. When Caecilius saw this, a trace of surprise and envy flashed in his eyes. Then, Caecilius looked around, holding the hanging ring, and gently passed through the air. A red flame rune pattern appeared in front of him. Then, the control rune pattern floated in the air, and in an instant, it suddenly exploded, and a red flame ripple quickly spread around. The Ring of Augustus, which was originally cast by John and others, shattered. Feeling that the surrounding space had returned to normal, Caecilius nodded gently, and with a casual stroke, he opened a sparking portal. "Let's go, Lockhart. I'll treat you at noon today, and you can order whatever you want." Caecilius greeted Lockhart. Then, seeing Lockhart looking at the messy environment around him, and his hesitant expression, he added, "Don't worry, Lockhart, there will be a special wizard to clean it up." Hearing this, Lockhart nodded slowly, and followed Caecilius into the portal. John and other wizards entered one by one. Shield, Coulson's office. On a brown desk, Coulson was looking down at the report in his hand. There was a mobile phone next to it, and Coulson occasionally glanced at it. After a while, whoosh, Coulson put down the report in his hand and exhaled. Why is Hell's Kitchen in chaos again? Why have several abnormal incidents occurred in succession? Can Kingpin really be in charge? While thinking, Coulson scratched his head subconsciously. After putting down his hand, he looked at the 2 extra hairs in his hand and said nothing. "Forget it. I won't think about it. I'd better think about which hair growth agent is good and buy another one. By the way, does Professor Lockhart have a magic potion that can grow hair?" When Coulson was thinking, suddenly, buzz, the phone vibrated, and Coulson quickly picked it up and looked at the message on the screen with a smile on his face. "Okay, someone will pick you up tomorrow morning when you're nearby." Chapter 185 Coulson's Universal Book Club Experience. In the morning, Queens, Bourne Street, near the Venetian Book Cafe. Carlson was alone, driving his favorite red antique car, the Laura. He drove slowly into Bourne Street, sitting in the main driver's seat, and the co-pilot was carrying some documents. After entering Bourne Street, Carlson touched his headset and said in a deep voice, "I have entered Bourne Street and will soon arrive near the destination." At the same time, a voice came from the headset, "Sir, the positioning system has been turned on and is currently operating normally. Okay, report any abnormal situation as soon as possible." Carlson replied, and then, as if he had thought of something, he added, "In case of loss of contact, do not take any action and continue to maintain the current state." "Okay, sir." A positive reply came from the headset. Carlson sat in the car and tried to search for the location of the Venetian Book Cafe in his memory. Unfortunately, everything was normal and every store on the street seemed to be operating normally, but the Venetian Book Cafe could not be found. Oh my god, he found this book cafe himself and sat in it more than once. In the end, he couldn't find it. You can say that a shop appeared out of thin air, but the problem is that there is really no trace at all, and this street looks very normal. This conflict between memory and reality makes Carlson feel inexplicably weird. After careful observation, Carlson picked up the documents on the co-pilot and got out of the car helplessly. Then he stood on the edge of the street, closed his eyes, reached out to touch the wall, and walked step by step according to the street scene in his memory. He has undergone special training and can strictly control the distance of each step and can control the direction freely to ensure that he will not go wrong. 1 step, 2 steps, step 56. The 57th step should reach the door. After taking another step, Carlson opened his eyes. Looking at the cake shop in front of him and smelling the aroma wafting from it, Carlson sighed helplessly. Sure enough, so many agents had failed. Why can he succeed? Then, Carlson returned to his antique car, stood there quietly, motionless, and always paid attention to the changes in the surrounding environment. After a while, suddenly, I don't know when, Carlson found a handsome young man in a short-sleeved shirt slowly walking towards him. Instantly, Carlson's heart began to be alert. He had no impression of this person just now. "Hello, are you Mr. Carlson?" Ian looked at Carlson, raised his head to examine Carlson's sparse hair, and compared it with the bald head mentioned by the teacher, and asked affirmatively. He was the only bald man on this street, and he was standing still, so it should be correct. Feeling Ian's gaze, Carlson subconsciously touched it, and the corner of his mouth twitched. Could it be that baldness has become his trademark? However, he still nodded and said, "Yes, I'm Phil Carlson. Who are you?" "I'm Ian Norton, a student of Mr. Lockhart." Ian said calmly, "The teacher asked me to take you to the book cafe." Hearing Ian's address to Lockhart, Carlson's eyes were thoughtful, and then he nodded and said, "Okay, thank you for your help." Hearing what Carlson said, Ian took out a card that was completely black with light golden lines on it, handed it to Carlson, and introduced it. "Mr. Carlson, because you are an ordinary muggle, so you can't see, let alone walk into the Universal Book Cafe. But the teacher has already considered this. You are holding this magic card, which has a spell cast on it, which can allow you to enter the Universal Book Cafe." Carlson nodded to show that he understood, and after taking the card from Ian, at a glance, he found that this card gave people an inexplicable sense of luxury. Gently touching it, he found that it had a frosted texture, and it seemed that there was a kind of fluctuation emanating from it, which made people feel very comfortable. The surface of the card is pitch black, with some light golden lines on it, forming a strange pattern. In the middle is engraved light golden words, Wangxiang Shuka. Below the words, there is a golden dragon. Surprisingly, the golden dragon slowly swims with the words as the center. Suddenly, Carlson didn't know if he was dazzled. He seemed to see the same golden dragon pattern on Ian's arm, and there seemed to be some words on it. But when he looked closely, he found nothing, and he was a little suspicious whether he had seen it wrong. And Ian, who was next to him, looked at Carlson, who was observing the picture without any impatience, and waited quietly. For muggles, or muggle agents, he has learned a hard lesson through the movies in the past few days. Although he knows that there may be exaggerations in the movies, as long as he thinks of the other party's identity, it is difficult for Ian to regard the other party as an ordinary muggle. Soon, perhaps feeling Ian's gaze, Coulson took the card and showed Ian a gentle smile. At the same time, he also labeled the other party's performance just now, patient. Just now, he was indeed carefully examining this magic card, which took a long time, but the other party was not impatient at all, and did not even remind him. It was enough to show the other party's patience. When doing things, the most taboo is impatience, and patience is a standard for those who achieve great things. Coulson looked at Ian, his eyes revealing gentleness and friendliness. Suddenly, his eyes passed Ian, and looked at the street in the distance. He saw it. He saw the Wangxiang Book Cafe, still in the original position. However, the entire facade has undergone a huge change. The originally white walls have changed to silver white, and even seem to be as crystal clear as jade. He vaguely found that there seemed to be some dark blue lines emerging above the wall, or something was flowing inside. The window against the wall has disappeared, and the plaque at the top has also changed to black. The color, text, golden dragon, and lines are roughly consistent with the card in his hand, as if there is some connection between the two. He subconsciously pinched the card in his hand, thinking. Then, he followed Ian, and walked towards the book cafe. This time, he entered the Universal Book Cafe very smoothly, and opened the door. As soon as he entered, a flash of shock flashed in Coulson's eyes. He found that the space inside was extremely spacious, at least 3 or 4 times larger than before. After entering, he instantly felt that the surrounding environment was very comfortable, and his body subconsciously relaxed, as if he had soaked in a hot spring. Very comfortable. Then, to his surprise, there were some people wearing yellow wizard robes sitting in it, with a ring in their hands, looking at the books in their hands, or chatting. At this moment, he tried his best to remember the appearance of each person, greedily asking for it, unwilling to give up any information. How could he not know that there must be wizards or mages here, just like Lockhart? Ordinary people can never enter here. He tried to listen to what these people were talking about, but unfortunately, for some reason, he could only see their mouths moving, and there was no sound at all. It was very quiet. "Mr. Coulson, the tutor is waiting for you in the study." Ian looked at Coulson, who was watching all the mages, smiled slightly, and reminded. Of course he knew what Coulson was doing now. When he worked at the Hog's Head Inn before, he also had similar actions, mainly to find wealthy customers and sell various products. But he didn't care. Muggles' access to information about wizards is a taboo in the wizarding world. Therefore, he had told his mentor about his concerns, and when the mentor explained it casually, he let him put aside all his doubts. These practices of Coulson were useless after all. Okay, let's go see Professor Lockhart. Coulson came back to his senses, looked at Ian with some regret, and said, "P.S. 1 minute later, the second update will be posted directly. Thanks to the praise of Soul Harvest, the Fan Club 9527, Miawuawa, Zahan, the protagonist 123, Sally 2005, Tkun, and ORDFF for the monthly votes. Chapter 186, SHIELD's artificially synthesized galleons. Universal Book Cafe, Study Room 101. Study Room 101 has always been Lockhart's exclusive study room and a place for him to receive friends. Therefore, this time when renovating Universal Book Cafe, Study Room 101 was also carefully designed. In order not to make the room appear too empty, Lockhart did not expand the space excessively. However, the privacy of the room, including the concentration of magic power and the placement of items, have been adjusted. Even a painting on the wall has magic fluctuations. At this moment, Lockhart sat at the desk and looked at the magic book in his hand with interest. This is a magic experience book that Cassilis gave to thank him for leaving the hunting team. It contains some of Cassilis's insights into magic such as mirror space, portal, and Sword of Vishandi. For Lockhart, it is still of great value. For example, if you stay in the mirror space for a long time, you will be repelled by the power of the mirror dimension and return to the real world. If Cassilis hadn't written about this specifically, he would not have known. After all, what he got was only the memory of magic knowledge. Suddenly bang, bang, Bang. Teacher, Mr. Carlson is here. Ian's voice came with a regular knock on the door. Come in. Click. The door opened, and Ian walked in with Carlson. He said hello to Lockhart, then turned around and left, closing the door tightly. Carlson, on the other hand, sat opposite, quietly looked at the magic book next to him, and then smiled gently at Lockhart. Carlson, do you want tea or coffee? Lockhart asked softly. Coffee will do. Carlson replied gently, thank you, Professor Lockhart. Lockhart smiled slightly, picked up the wand, and gently pointed at the cup in front of him. Soon, in Carlson's eyes, the originally empty cup kept surging with wine-red liquid, and smelling the mellow smell coming over. It was coffee. After taking it, he took a sip, and found that it was definitely coffee, and it was the taste of hand-brewed coffee, which shocked him even more. This method, which is similar to the creation of the void, is somewhat unscientific, no matter how you look at it, and it violates the natural laws he knows. It can be said that it is simply too magical. The thought flashed through Carlson's mind, and he said, Professor Lockhart, this time I came here, mainly to discuss the matter of gold galleons with you. Oh. Lockhart replied lightly, with a half smile on his face. I thought you came to me to learn about the matter of the Universal Book Cafe. Hearing this, Carlson was instantly delighted. Since Lockhart said it, it means there is a chance, so he quickly said, of course, Professor Lockhart. This time our director also wants me to ask about the matter of the Universal Book Cafe again, to see if our shield can help. Tell me, how is the gold galleon now? Lockhart did not reply directly, but returned to the previous topic. Carlson understood instantly, knowing that if this question was answered well, everything would go smoothly afterwards. After a pause, as if to reorganize his words, he said, Professor Lockhart, the gold galleon project has made great progress now. We have successfully synthesized a gold galleon. Carlson took out a gold galleon from the file bag next to him, and handed it to Lockhart, and continued. However, Tony found a problem. There is a special radiation on the original gold galleon, which we cannot replicate artificially. I don't know if it will affect the quality of the gold galleon. Lockhart was delighted when he heard Carlson say that it had been successfully synthesized. Sure enough, the resource collection of S.H.I.E.L.D., coupled with Tony's research and development capabilities, the combination of the two is absolutely extraordinary. However, after hearing Carlson's question, he instantly understood that it might be the magic of the goblin, which is specially used for anti-counterfeiting. So he took it in his hand, released his mental power, and carefully analyzed the differences of this artificially synthesized gold galleon. Overall, whether it is color, weight, or material, or even the conductivity of magic, it is consistent with the gold galleon. However, it does not have the magic of the goblin. After thinking for a moment, just in case, Lockhart waved his wand and opened a sparking portal in front of Carlson. On the other side of the portal was the goblin Bruno, who was currently concentrating on studying the short stick weapon in the hands of the Kamar-Taj wizard. Bruno, come here. Lockhart's voice rang through the portal and rang in the ears of the goblin tribe. Hearing the familiar voice, Bruno quickly came back to his senses and looked at his master Lockhart on the other side of the portal. He immediately trotted over and jumped over the portal, walked in front of Lockhart, and said flatteringly, Master, is there anything you need Bruno to do? I will definitely do it for you. As he said that, he looked at Carlson next to him and found that he was a muggle, and his eyes revealed disdain. But then, he continued to focus on Lockhart, with a loyal or flattering smile on his face. Come and take a look at this gold galleon. In addition to not having goblin magic, are there any other differences? Lockhart ordered Bruno. Okay, Master. Bruno quickly caught the synthetic gold galleon, held it in front of his eyes, and looked at it carefully. Carlson, who was standing next to him, saw Lockhart casually draw a line in front of him, and opened a portal similar to a space tunnel. He was shocked and felt pressured. The other party performed it in front of him, which was a demonstration. He thought that, if Lockhart wanted to go anywhere, he would have no way to stop him. What's more, if he wanted to assassinate, or escape from the attack range, S.H.I.E.L.D. had no way to do it. When he saw the goblin Bruno, the other party's strange face, short body, and big ears were almost certainly another species. The way the other party looked at him, The words he said, and even the action of holding up the gold coin and looking at it carefully. There is no doubt that the other party is definitely a highly intelligent life form. Damn, isn't this an alien? The thought flashed through Coulson's mind quickly. His face remained calm, but his heart was already surging. Especially the word master from the other party, and Lockhart's self-evident attitude. It made him feel more pressured. The wizard world seemed to be more complicated or bloody. Master, the method of refining this gold galleon is very clever, almost the same as a normal gold galleon. As he said, the goblin Bruno picked up the artificial gold galleon with 2 fingers, slightly infused magic power, looked at the faint light on the surface of the gold galleon, and continued, although I don't know how the other party refined it, but this gold galleon has the same pattern inside for anti-counterfeiting. But there is no magic power. At this point, Bruno's face was a little regretful. You are a goblin, can you give it the corresponding magic power? Lockhart asked directly. Bruno nodded hesitantly. Yes, I can, but although my magic is the magic of the fairies, and although the nature is the same, there are still significant differences. It will take a lot of effort to adjust it to match this. Hearing Bruno's answer, Lockhart frowned slightly. What he wanted was to refine gold galleons in large quantities. If it was just a small amount of more than 100, it would be meaningless. Suddenly, Coulson, who had been listening to the conversation between Lockhart and Bruno, spoke up. Professor Lockhart, perhaps our shield can help with this. P.S. The average subscription has continued to decline recently, and the subscription for the latest chapter has declined even more, which even scared me. So in order to get some data, I will post 2 chapters together, and at 12 noon, I will post 2 chapters in a row. Also, what do you think is the problem with this novel? You can comment directly. After I see it, I will continue to optimize the plot later. It's really this data that makes me sad. Chapter 187, Coulson's Dream Gift. Hey. Hearing what Coulson said, Lockhart exclaimed. He talked about these things in front of Coulson, naturally because there were some plans later that needed to be done by S.H.I.E.L.D. so that they could know more, and it would be more convenient for them to do things. However, he didn't expect that the other party had a way to deal with the goblin magic. This was really a pleasant surprise. Bruno, who was next to him, was a little surprised and doubtful when he heard what the muggle said. But then he became disdainful. A mere muggle who couldn't cast any magic. How could he touch the goblin magic? How do you say it, Coulson? Lockhart asked with interest. In response, Coulson paused and then slowly said, Professor Lockhart, I heard you talk before that the unknown radiation is called goblin magic. And your problem is how to adjust the goblin magic. Can I understand that it is to change this radiation to a certain extent? Hearing what Coulson said, Lockhart was thoughtful, and he seemed to understand what Coulson meant. But he still nodded and said, indeed. Hearing Lockhart's affirmation, Coulson's face lit up and said, our previous problem was that we couldn't artificially synthesize this radiation, or fairy magic. Because the nature of fairy magic is extremely special, it has nothing to do with most of the radiation in the world, and we can't find the connection, so we are a little helpless. But if we have a piece of fairy magic, we can completely influence and adjust the state of this radiation through scientific means. Change it to the state you need, Professor Lockhart. Then, Coulson thought of something and added, however, this may require a certain number of gold galleons as research objects. Hearing this, Lockhart nodded slightly, and the corners of his mouth curled up. Sure enough, it was almost the same as he thought. So, with a hint of seriousness in his tone, he asked directly, Coulson, I can provide you with what you want, but you have to give me a specific time. When can you give me specific results? Coulson hesitated when he heard Lockhart's serious tone, but he still said, Professor Lockhart, I can't estimate the specific time. Tony is leading this project, so you have to ask him for details. Then, without waiting for Lockhart to reply, Coulson continued, also, Professor Lockhart, if we want to artificially synthesize gold galleons, can you give us more of the magic metals you provided to Tony last time? We need them for our experiments. Hearing this, Lockhart said in a flat tone, Coulson, I can give you whatever you want. But what I want must be fulfilled. You must be clear about this. Hearing a hint of warning in Lockhart's flat tone, Coulson hesitated, nodded, and assured, "Don't worry, Professor Lockhart, SHIELD will definitely do what it says." Seeing this, Lockhart nodded slightly, waved his hand, and a space bag appeared in front of Coulson. Lockhart said lightly, "There are 30 gold galleons in it, and there are a lot of magic metals for you, and what you need. As long as you can achieve my goal, the rest will belong to SHIELD. If you can't achieve it, they will definitely return to me in the end." At the end, although Lockhart's tone was flat, it contained an unquestionable taste. Coulson thought of Lockhart's method of opening the portal casually before, and his heart sank, but he still nodded to show that he understood. "Okay, I look forward to your reply. Also, if the task is completed, this space extension bag will be given to you SHIELD. Even more powerful magic items, life extending potions, etc. As long as you achieve the goal, you will have the opportunity to obtain them." At this point, Lockhart's words were full of temptation. After hearing this, although Coulson knew that this was a means of coercion and inducement by the other party, his heart was still pounding and full of passion. He had seen the magic amulet last time, and the magic potion seemed to be unscientific, which made him believe what Lockhart said. Thinking about it, Coulson nodded quickly and held the space bag tightly in his hand. Sensing the change in Coulson's expression, Lockhart's mouth curled up. He was not afraid of spending money, but he was afraid that the money would be wasted, so he put pressure on him and tempted him. At the same time, the goblin Bruno saw that there was no business for him, so he said hello and left very sincerely, not disturbing his master to talk about business. After seeing Bruno leave, Lockhart continued to ask, "Coulson, is there anything else?" As he said, Lockhart took a sip of tea, as if to indicate that, if Coulson had nothing else to do, he should leave. "Professor Lockhart, our director would like to ask if there is a potion that can quickly restore the body's condition." As he said, Coulson introduced, "It is the kind of body that has been in a weak state for many years and wants to quickly restore to the peak state." Hearing Coulson's request, Lockhart was thoughtful. The body has been in a weak state for many years and wants to restore to the peak. Why does it sound so familiar? After a little thought, he suddenly realized that he was right after calculating the time period. It should be for Captain America. He remembered that Captain America was the first generation of super soldiers. Among many test subjects, he was the only one who perfectly integrated the super soldier serum. Thinking of this, Lockhart inexplicably thought of Spider-Man Peter's blood. Then, Lockhart looked at Coulson and nodded gently. "Yes, a high-quality vitality tonic can meet your requirements." As he said that, Lockhart waved his hand gently, and a bottle of light yellow potion appeared in front of Coulson. "This bottle is enough for 20 ordinary muggles to return to their peak state." Then, after a moment of hesitation, looking at Coulson's sparse hair, Lockhart raised the corner of his mouth and waved his hand again to pour a light green potion. He continued, "This is a shampoo of the Potter family. I was going to give it to a friend. I didn't expect that he had a grudge against the Potter family, so I kept it. By chance, I found that it suits you. Use it to wash your hair. Not only will it clean, but it will also promote the growth of new hair." Well, originally he asked someone to buy a bottle of shampoo and gave it to Snape so that he could clean up the greasy hair. But he didn't expect that the other party sent the shampoo of the Potter family. Then I can't give it to him, otherwise the friendship will be overturned. After hearing Lockhart's introduction, Coulson's eyes lit up. He didn't care about the vitality tonic potion anymore. He took the shampoo in his hand and couldn't let it go. He has been thinking too much recently, and his hair has fallen a lot. He was going to find a shampoo that can stabilize the hair roots. Unexpectedly, there is such a thing in the wizarding world, and the effect is so amazing. Then, I'm giving you the shampoo and vitality tonic as a gift. I'll have to trouble you to keep an eye on them during this period. You should take good care of them." Lockhart's words immediately made Coulson burst into tears. Although Shield gained something from each transaction, it also cost a lot. Now he can finally get something for free, and most importantly, his problem can be effectively solved. God knows how many ways he has tried to solve the Bugness problem, but none of them worked. Lockhart saw Coulson's expression and a faint smile floated on his face. Because of his memories of his previous life, he knew the status of S.H.I.E.L.D. very well. Through the plot, he had a good impression of Coulson, and the rest were very ordinary. "Thank you, Professor Lockhart," Coulson said with gratitude. "Don't forget my business." Lockhart reminded him that he never gave gifts for free. The target of pressure just now was S.H.I.E.L.D., and the target of inducement now was Coulson. After all, the county magistrate is not as good as the current manager. Coulson nodded to show that he understood. He still understood the principle of taking money from others and eliminating disasters for them. It just so happens that this is also within his responsibility, so Tony has to suffer a little. Well, for the sake of his future heir, it's up to you, Tony, to use your intelligence. Then, Coulson hesitated for a moment, as if he remembered something, and asked tentatively, "Professor Lockhart, I saw that you recently transformed the Universal Book Cafe. Do you need any help from S.H.I.E.L.D.? Chapter 188 Tony's Pride, Level 5 Magic Card. Professor Lockhart, thank you for your recognition of S.H.I.E.L.D. I'll leave first." After a conversation, Coulson tightly grasped the space extension bag in his hand and walked out with a brisk pace. This time, he asked all the questions he should ask, and the harvest was also full, even beyond his imagination, so he naturally left with satisfaction. Lockhart looked at Coulson's leaving figure and fell into deep thought. Unexpectedly, S.H.I.E.L.D. would be able to produce results so quickly. In other words, Tony, who is worthy of being Iron Man, has such a genius who can even make a time machine. What project can't be done? It seems that I still need to get closer to him when I have a chance in the future. At the same time, Tony Stark, Iron Man, who also lives in New York, in his villa, he looked at the machine in front of him, or more precisely, the weapon. Suddenly ache. Tony sneezed, rubbed his nose, and felt much better. He cursed in his heart, wondering who was talking about him. But he changed his mind and continued to look at the round pancake-shaped machine in front of him that was constantly rotating, or it would be more appropriate to call it a weapon. The corners of his mouth slightly raised, revealing a proud smile. This was specially made, based on the unknown radiation left on the wizard's gold coin. He had communicated with Lockhart before and knew that wizards have magic. He was worried about what magic was. As a result, he found this unknown radiation on the wizard's gold coin, and instantly he understood that it was probably closely related to magic. Therefore, it was named magic radiation. In order to avenge the last shock, he was going to give Lockhart a good look this time. At this moment, Coulson had just walked out of the door of the study room 101, entering the spacious book cafe hall again. This time, he was alone and no one cared about him, so he could observe carefully. But at the same time, with his meticulous observation of macro expressions, he found that the wizards in yellow clothes around him looked at him with a feeling of watching a good show. To be precise, watching a monkey show. Although I don't know why. However, for Coulson, no matter what the other party's eyes are, it doesn't matter. On the contrary, he is now desperately memorizing the layout of the Universal Book Cafe and the faces of all the wizards present. As long as he gets out, report to the S.H.I.E.L.D. information department immediately and try to find out some people's information. Maybe, S.H.I.E.L.D.'s breakthrough in the magic world will start from this step. Soon, Coulson thought he remembered the faces of all the wizards present, so he went out directly. His steps were a little hurried. He wanted to get out earlier and record the information in his mind earlier. Since he entered the book cafe, he found that the so-called headphones, the so-called positioning system, and other eavesdropping devices were all ineffective. They were useless. So, he could only rely on his brain to remember. Click. With the sound of the door closing, Coulson walked out of the Wangxiang Book Cafe. He walked quickly towards his antique car, reviewing the facial information of everyone just now. However, Coulson's face revealed confusion, disbelief, and a hint of fear. With every step he took, he found that the memory in his mind became more and more blurred. The more he wanted to remember something, the more blurred it became. The face of the wizard, the layout of the Vincian Book Cafe, and even the conversation between Lockhart and him became blurry from the beginning. With every step, the memory faded a little. Even when he was about to reach his car, he vaguely seemed to remember that he only came for a book cafe. When he walked to his red antique car Laura, he turned his head and looked back at the street, his eyes blank. There was no book cafe. What was he doing here? This thought emerged in Carlson's mind. Then, he thought desperately, and he felt that this was very important. But he found that the more he thought, the blanker his mind became. For some reason, suddenly, Carlson subconsciously took a black card from his pocket, put it in front of his eyes, and looked at it carefully. Just as he was wondering what this was, suddenly, a cold feeling began to spread from his palm to his body and brain. The next moment, in his sight, an extremely conspicuous store suddenly appeared on this street. Silver white walls, dark blue lines, black plaques, and light golden words it read, Vincian Book Cafe. In an instant, memories came back. He remembered. He came to the Universal Book Cafe to find Professor Lockhart. Then, along with the cool feeling in his mind, all his conversations with Professor Lockhart came to mind. The next second after the memory came to mind, what was the most important information he remembered instantly? The layout of the Universal books and the appearance of the mages. He tried hard to recall, desperately, but he found that he still remembered the general layout of the book cafe, and the appearance of the mages was still vague. In fact, he only remembered that the other party seemed to be wearing yellow clothes, but he was not sure. At the same time, the cold feeling in his mind stopped. Then, involuntarily, a series of information emerged in his mind. The Universal Book Cafe has been cast with magic, and the mental power has been judged. The mental power is insufficient, the target is not a legal mage, and the memory is being erased. It is found that the holder has a level 5 magic card, but due to limited mental power, it can be exempted from some spells. Welcome the holder to have a higher level magic card, or improve mental power, and enter the Universal Book Cafe again. Feeling the information emerging in his mind, Carlson smiled bitterly. He said that Professor Lockhart had never suffered a loss. Every time you give, you must ask for something in return. Why is he so generous today? He let him enter the Universal Book Cafe directly, and get access to so many wizards' information. He spent so much effort, and tried his best to remember, but in the end, the other party directly beat him back to his original form. But what is this so-called magic card? I have to ask about it next time. When I thought of the level 5 magic card in my mind, Carlson felt a familiar routine. How come this method is a bit like the authority level set by the director? Without a certain authority level, it is impossible to obtain more advanced intelligence, which stimulates these agents to desperately upgrade their levels. While Carlson was thinking, suddenly, a voice came from his ear. Sir, calling the commander. Please answer if you hear me. Please answer if you hear me. After coming to his senses, Carlson touched the headset next to him and asked immediately. Received. Is there any valuable information? Is the positioning system still effective? Soon, a regretful voice came from the headset. Sir, since you approached the target area, both machine observation and manual observation have failed. You disappeared from all our sight, as if you didn't exist. The positioning system has also failed. Hearing the voice from the headset, Carlson simply replied, then walked directly into the car and drove to the headquarters. Sure enough, it is almost impossible to get something for free from Lockhart without paying a price. The other party has done too much in every aspect, and they can't get started at all. It's simply impossible to get a needle in and water in. And they can't beat them, can't scold them, and have to beg them. Why do I feel more and more frustrated the more I think about it? Carlson, who was driving, thought silently. However, he glanced at the space extension bag on the co-pilot next to him, and thought of the shampoo inside. Looking at the reflection of his sparse hair in the front glass, Carlson's eyes revealed a glimmer of hope. Chapter 189 Cassilis in Fury. New York Temple, Magic Training Room. In the spacious training room, Cassilis looked at the 7 new mages in front of him with a serious face. Say it again. What's your fault? I'm sorry, instructor, we were wrong. We shouldn't have separated without permission in an unknown environment, and we shouldn't have thought that the instructor was there, and relaxed our minds, thus falling into a desperate situation. John and other mages shouted in unison. Their foreheads were covered with sweat, and their wizard robes were soaked. God knows, 3 days ago, because of their carelessness, they almost died, not to mention the despair at that time. After returning, Instructor Cassilis had a gloomy face, and his attitude towards them has always been very serious, with the words "you are all trash" written on his face, as a punishment for their almost death. These days, the instructor assigned them a lot of training tasks, from the number of magic casts to the actual combat intensity, which made them miserable. It can be said that 24 hours a day, minus the time for eating, sleeping, and resting, 12 hours are spent on training. Finally today, I can be relieved. I'll say it again, you made a mistake. Cassilis' serious voice sounded again in the training room. I'm sorry, instructor, we were wrong. We shouldn't have separated without permission in an unknown environment, and we shouldn't have thought that the instructor was there, and relaxed our minds, thus falling into a desperate situation. Hearing the mages shouting in unison, Cassilis' serious expression softened slightly. But then, with a cold face, he once again instructed, you all trained under me. Next time you carry out a mission, I hope you can learn a lesson. The enemy is not a fool. When they see a large number of people, they will naturally set a trap. You might as well expect him to fight against the 7 of you alone. You might as well expect thunder from the sky and Vishandi to destroy reality for you. I can't accompany you every time. Next time, if a similar situation occurs again, I can only collect your bodies for you. Cassilis' tone became more and more serious as he spoke. The faces of the mages also became solemn. They didn't forget. Last time, the instructors were almost trapped. If it weren't for the wizard Lockhart and the giant snake, the instructors would have really collected their bodies. Then, Cassilis looked at the wizards and nodded heavily. His face softened and said, this special training ends here. The next time you go on a mission, I hope to see you come back alive and well. Hearing this, all the wizards nodded. They didn't want to die. This colorful world couldn't be without them. Then, Cassilis gave a few instructions and turned to leave. Seeing the instructor leave the training room, all the wizards collapsed on the ground, wiped the sweat from their foreheads, cast a cleaning spell on themselves, sucked out all the sweat on their clothes, and then dried them. Fortunately, the special training has ended. If you dare to do this during the training, you have to double the amount of exercise. Mitchell, how do you feel? Can you adapt? John asked the thin wizard Mitchell, who was slumped on the floor next to him. It's okay. The instructor knows that I have the worst physical fitness, so I just pushed my physical limit. Mage Michelle said self-deprecatingly. Let's not talk about me. How are you? Michelle asked Yuno next to him. I'm about the same as you. The instructor's eyes are too sharp. Although the amount is more than yours, it's also pushed to my physical limit. Yuno replied weakly. If you want to talk about the worst, you have to talk about John. This time, he was really miserable. Yuno said, and Michelle nodded in agreement. The two of them watched together, and John lay directly on the floor, motionless. As the captain, he has an unshakable responsibility for this operation. Cassilis treats John with the most serious and demanding attitude. During training, he directly trains to break the limit of the human body. What if he gets injured? What if he is too tired and can't move? Lockhart's vitality tonic is provided next to him. In short, if Cassilis doesn't teach John a profound lesson this time, he will be a useless instructor. 7 mages, all of them are going to die. A batch of fresh blood that he just recruited for the New York temple is gone. It doesn't matter if they are idiots. The most frightening thing is that the captain is an idiot, leading everyone to run happily on the road of death. When he thought of this, Cassilis almost couldn't hold back his anger. John is now lying on the ground, his eyes looking at the ceiling. Only his chest is constantly floating and gasping. He feels that he is simply stupid in this mission. He has no rejection of the instructor's strict training. Instead, he is exposed to the strict training to dispel his inner fear. Fortunately, no one died. Even if one died, he would blame himself in his heart. If they all died, he would not know what to do. After a while, John recovered his strength, stood up, and said to all the mages with apology, I'm sorry, I'm the one who has the heaviest responsibility this time, and I've put everyone in danger. Hearing this, all the mages waved their hands and comforted them. The enemy is too cunning this time, and they even use technological weapons. They also knew that according to normal combat standards, nothing would happen to the 7 of them. but who made the Dormammu believer who appeared this time turn out to be a technological tycoon. After investigation, it was found that the other party not only spent money to buy people and performed a large number of blood sacrifices, but also played with technological weapons. Who would have thought of this? Moreover, even the instructor, the wizard Lockhart, was almost trapped. This time, John is really not to blame. If it were them, they might have been tricked. Of course, the most important thing is that everyone is safe and sound, which is the most critical. After all, they had a good relationship before, studying together, training together, and fighting together, and the boat of friendship is still relatively solid. Seeing everyone comforting themselves, John felt a little better. After thinking for a while, he said, "Does anyone want to play? Whatever, I'll treat you. Just take it as a way to vent the pressure in my heart." At this point, John laughed at himself and said, "I'm still a little scared now." When the mages heard this, their eyes lit up. Someone treated them, which was a good thing. They all said, "I think the Wilson bar in Hungary that I went to last time was good. Goodbye, let's go to the hot springs of the Rotorua volcano. I've been exhausted these days." Or, "Let's go to the east for a big meal. I think the food in the east is good." John looked at the mages sitting cross-legged on the floor, discussing traveling around the world, and didn't care. As mages of Kamar-Taj, portals are standard, and they are now in the New York Temple, which records a large number of teleportation points around the world. Even if they don't know the specific location, they can be directly teleported through the New York Temple. The only thing to pay attention to is whether your wallet is enough. Suddenly, the mage Mitchell next to him suddenly said, "I heard that Master Lockhart opened a universal book cafe, which is specially for mages. Do you want to go and have a look?" Thanks to Shadows Daily, 241,324. Dead Tree Love Shadow, Noppel, GT Loves Wife, 82 years of draft beer, Bill Rice, Book Friend 201807100739444448. Book Friend 2018022116382595. Fool's Aurora, Deadbread, Please Call Me Dangshen, I'm Dujet, Imfeel Blue, and 3 chicken legs a day for the monthly ticket. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 190 Magic Card, Magic Points. Wangxiang Book Cafe. The renovated Wangxiang Book Cafe is divided into 4 areas. On the surface, the largest area is naturally the Book Cafe Hall, which is cleverly distributed with exquisite silver white desks, with 4, 6, and 8 seats. On the bookshelf in the middle, there are all kinds of books, including ordinary books and magic books. The way of placement has been specially designed, like a rune pattern, which gives the wizard a strange sense of beauty when viewed from a distance. In front of the hall, near the door, there is a relatively wide area, which is the reception area. Generally, wizards open portals in the reception area. Other areas have space restrictions because of the setting of related magic. Without permission, the portal cannot be opened at all. Behind the hall, there are study rooms one after another. The space looks a little small, but the space extension spell is cast inside, and the space is very spacious. If the hall is used for leisure and relaxation, then the study is used for talking about things or doing business. As for the last area, it is the backstage, which is for the house elf gold coins, Ian Remy, and Veritarest. At this moment, a sparking portal suddenly appeared in the reception area of the bookstore. 7 wizards appeared one after another, and they were John and his party. Just after entering the reception area of the Universal Book Cafe, John and others suddenly felt inexplicably comfortable. It was as if they had arrived at an oxygen-rich area from an oxygen-poor area. With each breath, it seemed as if the pores were stretched out, greedily absorbing the surrounding magic power. In the perception of John and others, not only did the concentration of magic power increase to a certain extent, but it was also very peaceful. This is Master Lockhart's Universal Book Cafe. Feeling the overall tranquility and peaceful atmosphere of the book cafe, Master Yuno whispered, Yes, it's written like this on the teleportation point, and look, isn't it written Universal Book Cafe now? John next to him reminded in a low voice. Then, he looked at the front desk not far away, walked over, and said to a female wizard with a delicate face who was reading a book at the front desk, "Hello, I'm John, the Wizard of Kamar-Taj. I'd like to ask if Master Lockhart is here. We came here to thank him this time. Looking for a teacher?" Vera heard the voice in his ear, put down the book in his hand, looked at the wizard in front of him, thought for a while, smiled gently, and said slowly, "Sorry, the teacher is not in the book cafe now, and it may take some time for him to come. Otherwise, you can read a book next to you for a while, and I'll talk to him when the teacher arrives." John looked at Vera's delicate face, faint smile, tall figure, especially with the light grey shirt she was wearing, highlighting a capable temperament, and a flash of surprise flashed in his eyes. After listening, he asked in surprise, "Are you a student of Master Lockhart?" "Yes." Vera nodded to show affirmation, and then continued to ask, "I see that you 7 people. Do you want to sit in the hall, or find a study?" "The hall. Let's wait for Master Lockhart," John said after thinking for a while. Then, as if she had thought of something, she asked, "How much will it cost? How much in dollars?" Hearing John's question, Vera smiled, shook her head and said, "We don't accept dollars." Then, she took out a black card with light gold text printed on it and introduced, "We charge magic points. This is a magic card made by our mentor. You can inject magic power into it and get a certain amount of magic points. Or you can get magic points by selling some potions and magic items. All consumption of book cafes is mainly in magic points." Hearing Vera's introduction, John fell into thought. All consumption is through magic points. Why does he feel inexplicably familiar? Then, Vera was heard saying, "Our guide said that all wizards in Kamar-Taj can get a magic card for free, and 10 magic points as a gift. Here are 7 cards. Keep them well. You can get the specific information about the magic cards through mental contact." John looked at the small stack of magic cards in front of him and nodded slowly. "Okay, I understand." Then, he picked up a magic card and gently probed into it a part of his mental power. In an instant, a large amount of information flooded into his mind. Magic cards are divided into 5 levels. This is the 5th level magic card. High-level magic cards have functions such as space teleportation and defense. 5-level magic cards have the functions of storing magic power and releasing magic power. All consumption of the Universal Book Cafe is paid by magic points. 1 standard magic power can be converted into 10 magic points, and the specific consumption can be detected by mental power. The services of the Universal Book Cafe are as follows. The lobby consumes 10 magic points per hour, and the study consumes 100 magic points per hour. Notarization contract service for borrowing magic books. Sensing the large amount of information brought by the card, John's heart was turbulent. He knew that Master Lockhart was very powerful and had opened a book cafe. Unexpectedly, the other party did not open a book cafe, but a trading place specifically for mages. Even the universal currency was already prepared. Suddenly, John admired Lockhart very much, especially when he saw the magic card in his hand and clearly sensed the magic fluctuations contained in it. He had a deeper understanding of Lockhart's financial resources. Even if the consumption of this magic card was very low, it was given to all wizards for free. In general, this amount was not small. Moreover, looking at the surrounding environment, the daily consumption was not small. If you were not rich, you could not afford this. I just wondered if Lockhart could make a profit. Thinking about it, John nodded to Vera, indicating that he understood. After thinking about it, he asked, "There are 7 of us. This is our first time here. Where should we sit?" After hearing this, Vera thought for a while and replied, "If you 7 want to wait for the instructor, you should sit at desk number 56. It is close to the teacher's study." After saying that, Vera shook the bell next to her. Ding ding ding. With the crisp sound of the bell, the next moment, the house elf gold coin teleported in front of Vera, looked at Vera with big eyes, and said, "Vera, what do you need the gold coins for?" There was a hint of flattery in his tone, because he knew that Vera had now become a wizard. No, it should be said that she was a wizard and a student of her master. "Take these guests to desk 56. Vera said gently. Okay, Mr. Wizard, follow me. The gold coin turned around and said to John in front of him. After the strict requirements and even training of his master Lockhart, he no longer shows a flattering expression to all wizards, and his attitude of speaking will only be very polite. John looked stunned, looking at the strange creature with short stature, big eyes and big ears in front of him. After hearing what the other party said, he came back to his senses and hesitated for a while. He felt that he had wasted a lot of time and asked a lot of questions. It would be a bit bad to ask more. Well, the most important thing is to ask more questions, which will make him look shallow. He plans to go back and read the books carefully to check what species the other party is. Can't be confused. So he nodded and then waved to the 6 wizards behind him. Follow the gold coin and walk to desk 56. After walking to desk 56, looking at the 8 seats above, people sat down one after another. Then, the gold coin pressed a button on the desk and introduced to John and other mages. This is a magic circle that restrains sound, and your communication will not be leaked. After the introduction, the gold coin looked at John and others and found that he had no problem, then turned and left. Seeing the gold coin leave, the 6 mages who had been full of doubts asked John one after another about the book cafe opened by Master Lockhart. They saw John communicating there all the time. In particular, they were quite curious about the strange creature gold coin just now. However, they saw that others did not ask, so they did not ask. Well, the idea of saving face still exists. Then John took out 6 magic cards and handed them to everyone and began to explain. As John explained, the mage's eyes were gradually filled with surprise and shock. Chapter 191, Basilisk and Snake Fruit. Lockhart's study. At this moment, Lockhart sat on a chair, carefully picked up a lens, infused it with a slight magic power, put it in front of his eyes, and observed it carefully. The previous battle between the basilisk and the followers of Dormammu made him quite satisfied. The huge body, the venom that breaks the magic, and the opponent's deadly eyes are simply a crushing existence for ordinary wizards. Although the last time the followers of Dormammu saw the eyes of the basilisk, they could only be petrified because of the existence of the protective shield. But Lockhart has a new idea. Petrification is good. It won't kill anyone to take a look, and it is also convenient to remove the petrification later. He can't always be in the Vincian book cafe, and the book cafe also needs a top combat force to sit in. The basilisk is the most suitable, especially when there is a dispute in the book cafe, or someone is fighting. The petrification of the basilisk can effectively restrict everyone's actions. It's just too suitable. Therefore, he specially modified the invisible lens of the basilisk and changed it to 2 modes. The first one is naturally the original mode, which completely restricts the sight of the basilisk and will not have any attack effect. The second is to relax certain restrictions, maintain the petrification effect, but not lethal, and is the most suitable for restricting human actions. Therefore, he specially optimized the contact lenses of the basilisk. However, in order to prevent accidents, the opening of the second mode cannot be left to the basilisk itself, but must be judged by his students. And even if something happens, they can quickly contact him through the Golden Dragon brand. Soon, Lockhart rechecked the 2 new lenses, and after finding that they were correct, he summoned the basilisk and replaced him with a new version of contact lenses. Then, he sent his latest arrangements for the basilisk to the students through the Golden Dragon brand. Suddenly, hey, what did John and the others want to see me about? Feeling the message sent by Vera through the Golden Dragon brand, Lockhart squinted his eyes and thought. After thinking about it, Lockhart directly opened a portal to enter the study, and at the same time, sent a message to the gold coin through the brand. Wangxiang Book Cafe, desk number 56. John and his group of 7 wizards sat at the desk, each with a cup of coffee in front of them, and took a sip from time to time during the chat. Because there is a sound binding magic circle on the desk, John and his group of 7 do not have to worry about their voices affecting others. While the group was talking, suddenly, the master is already waiting for everyone in the study. The house elf gold coin walked up to John and shouted, "Ah, Master Lockhart is back." John, who had just come to his senses, asked subconsciously, Yes, the master is waiting for everyone in the study. Please follow me. Goldcoin said affirmatively. Don't talk anymore. Master Lockhart is back. John nodded to show that he understood and said to his friends around him. Then, the group followed Goldcoin into the study room number 101. At this moment, Lockhart was sitting at the table, and there were 7 cups and 7 seats opposite and on both sides. After seeing John and his group enter, they directly asked them to sit down. Master Lockhart, this time we mainly want to thank you and your pet. The instructor told us that, if you hadn't asked Mr. Giant Snake to take action, we would have really had to go to see the Dormammu followers. John, who had just sat down, expressed his gratitude to Lockhart. The wizards around him did the same, with a trace of fear on their faces. Then, John took out a gift box, pushed it in front of Lockhart, and introduced, Master Lockhart, this is a gift we carefully prepared. Snake fruit is loved by snakes. Generally speaking, 1 snake fruit is enough for the energy needed by magic creatures for 1 day. Moreover, for snake magic creatures, long-term consumption is conducive to the evolution of blood, and it should have many benefits for Mr. Giant Snake. The 7 of us joined together and bought 100 pieces, which is our gift. After listening to John's introduction, Lockhart was a little surprised. He had never heard of snake fruit. It should be a magical plant unique to the Marvel world. While thinking, Lockhart nodded, smiled gently, and said, then I will thank you on behalf of the little snake. If the little snake knew that you were so attentive, it would definitely like it very much. As he spoke, Lockhart called the basilisk, and the bracelet that the basilisk transformed into slowly changed and swam to the desk. Then, as if sensing something, the basilisk ran directly to the gift box. Sensing the basilisk's eager emotions, Lockhart was thoughtful. At the same time, after seeing the basilisk, the wizards around also expressed their gratitude. Thank you, Mr. Giant Snake. Generally speaking, magical creatures like this have their own intelligence. What's more, the wizards also collect intelligent magical creatures when they collect pets. It would be very troublesome to control them without intelligence. Hiss, hiss, hiss. As if sensing the emotions of the wizards around, or the desire for the snake fruit, the basilisk made a hissing sound, as if telling its master. After feeling the feedback from the basilisk, he comforted it a little, and waved his hand casually. The next moment, 7 palm-sized scales fell in front of 7 wizards. Lockhart smiled and said, John, the little snake said he likes your gifts very much. This is the scale he shed his skin before. It has good magic defense ability, and is very strong. It can be regarded as a piece of excellent magic material. This is the little snake's return gift to you. After hearing this, John and other wizards looked at the dark green scales in front of them, which seemed to be crystal clear like jade, and a touch of joy rose on their faces. They could sense that there was a strong fluctuation of magic power in it. Although the value could not be said to be very high, it was definitely not low. Well, this is actually what Lockhart collected all the snake's luffs of the basilisk after he subdued it. This is the accumulation of the basilisk for thousands of years, and the value is not low. Thank you, Master Lockhart. Thank you, Mr. Giant Snake. John thanked and put away the scales in front of him. But when he changed his words to call it a little snake, he obviously felt a little awkward because they had seen the huge body of the basilisk. When Lockhart heard this, he nodded slightly and continued to ask, by the way, I want to ask, where did you buy the snake fruit? Can you buy it in bulk? If possible, I want to buy some in bulk for the little snake later. With his appetite, I'm afraid he will eat a lot later. Well, when he observed just now, he found that the energy contained was indeed quite a lot. 1 snake fruit might be enough to satisfy the basilisk, but 3 or 5 should be about the same. This is good news. He used gold coins to feed the basilisk before and consumed a lot of materials. He not only bought a large amount of fresh meat from the Muggle world, but also a lot of flesh and blood of magical creatures. Overall, it is worth a lot. If the price of snake fruit is right, he can buy it in bulk later. He is quite interested in the blood evolution that John just introduced. The current strength of the basilisk is good. If the blood really evolves in the future, will it further improve its strength? Even if it can actively choose to die and petrify the object, it would be the best. After hearing Lockhart's question, John thought for a moment and said, Master Lockhart, if you want to buy a large number of snake fruits in a short period of time, it may not be realistic. Because the Kamar-Taj wizards do not have much demand for snake fruits, we have not focused on cultivating them. We have also asked some friends to come here to collect them. However, if you need them, you can go to the Snake Valley in the Secret Realm to look for them, and you may find something. Secret Realm? Snake Valley? Hearing John's suggestion, Lockhart's eyes revealed a thoughtful look. Thinking about it, he asked, John, can you tell me more about the Secret Realm and the Snake Valley? Chapter 192 Lockhart's Student Training Program. The Secret Realm and the Snake Valley? John looked at Lockhart and murmured in confusion. Seeing this, Lockhart casually explained, didn't Cassilis tell you? I just joined Kamar-Taj recently, so I don't know much about the Secret Realm and the Snake Valley. So that's why I haven't heard of Master Lockhart's reputation before. With such a powerful giant snake, he should be quite famous. John thought thoughtfully. However, facing Lockhart's question, John said to Master Mitchell next to him, Mitchell, you know the Secret Realm best. Please introduce it to Master Lockhart. Then, Lockhart turned his eyes to Mitchell. Mitchell pondered for a moment and introduced, Master Lockhart, the Secret Realm is actually the cultivation ground for some training resources of the Kamar-Taj mages. He was captured by the Supreme Mage. At this point, Mitchell's tone was full of reverence. It is said that many years ago, a dimensional demon invaded the Earth. The Supreme Sorcerer took direct action and entered the opponent's dimension, almost killing the opponent. In order to survive, the dimensional demon had to give up most of the dimension and escape. And the Supreme Sorcerer made this part of the dimension into a secret realm, which is a resource specifically for the mages to practice. However, at this point, Mitchell showed a regretful look. Because this is only a broken dimension and cannot operate automatically, long-term opening will only lose most of the dimensional power, so Kamar-Taj usually closes the secret realm, waiting for the resources inside to grow naturally, and harvests them every once in a while. Despite this, in order to ensure that the secret realm can operate normally, Kamar-Taj needs to replenish some dimensional power from time to time. Hearing this, Lockhart's mind was flowing, and a lot of ideas emerged in his mind. The Supreme Sorcerer is still ruthless. The dimensional space is the lifeblood of the dimensional demon. This is equivalent to cutting meat from the dimensional demon, and the amount cut is not small. It seems that he also replenishes dimensional power from time to time. This is to make the dimensional demons continue to bleed. No wonder these dimensional demons dare not enter the earth in person. If they are caught, they will become fertilizer. As his thoughts turned, Lockhart tapped the desk lightly with his fingertips. After listening to Mitchell's introduction, he continued to ask, can we talk about Snake Valley? Snake Valley is actually a valley. Some Kamar-Taj wizards found that there are many snake-like magical creatures there, so they named it Snake Valley. Mitchell explained. Then, he said his own guess. Some Kamar-Taj wizards analyze that there must be a reason why there are so many snakes in Snake Valley. Maybe there are snake fruits you need, or magical plants that are helpful to snake-like magical creatures. When will the secret realm be open recently? Lockhart asked directly. Mitchell thought for a while and said, after all, it is open twice a year, and it has been more than 4 months since the last opening. Generally speaking, it may take more than a month. The specific time depends on the reminder of the wizard who is specifically in charge of the secret realm. Hearing this, Lockhart felt a little regretful. He was afraid that he could not enter this time. He was quite interested in the secret realm created by the Supreme Mage. After listening to the introduction just now, there must be a lot of good things in it. After a little thought, Lockhart did not continue to ask questions about the secret realm. He could just ask more about the rest. He must know more about this aspect than these new mages. By the way, John, let me ask, how is your usual practical training? Lockhart's question embarrassed John and others. They wanted to say that their practical training was good, but when they thought of the scene of the group being wiped out a few days ago, they couldn't say it. Seeing their embarrassed expressions, Lockhart suddenly realized and immediately changed the question. My students lack practical experience. I want to see how to improve their practical experience. Do you have any good suggestions? Seeing John and his group of new mages forming a group to die, Lockhart had the idea of cultivating Ian and others' practical ability. Don't fall into the trap of others like John and others because of lack of practical experience. That would be a death before success. Although he felt that the students he had carefully selected were not stupid enough to do so, he still had to be prepared for the worst. Hearing Lockhart's question, John and the others pondered for a moment, and the wizard Andrew on the side said, "Master Lockhart, for actual combat training, we mainly use two-person confrontation or multi-person melee to accompany you. If you don't have many students, you can directly let them come to the New York Temple, and we can take them with us during the training." Well, he definitely didn't suggest this, because Vera was very beautiful. Hearing Andrew's suggestion, Lockhart had a strange idea in his heart. Following this group of melee mages to train, wouldn't his students behind him also be influenced by them and jump from a good long-range mage to the ranks of melee? This is not okay. Although melee ability does need to be trained, a mage should still look like a mage, focusing on casting spells and supplemented by melee combat. He can't go astray. After hesitating for a while, Lockhart slowly said, "Okay, I'll discuss it with Cassilis later, and we'll talk about it then." Well, close combat can be practiced, but the most important thing is to practice magic. When he thought of the melee wizards of Kamar-Taj fighting the long-range wizards of Harry Potter, Lockhart's evil taste was inexplicably ignited. However, actual combat training is still training after all, and students still have to see blood if they have the opportunity. While constantly thinking, Lockhart gradually perfected his student training plan. As for whether his students would leak information about the Harry Potter world after communicating with the wizards of Kamar-Taj, he was not worried about this. The character of the students he had selected before was verified through magic. He checked all their memories before selecting 3. What's more, the golden dragon magic brand he left on everyone's arms before was not for fun. The functions mentioned before, such as calling for rescue, positioning, communication, data transmission, etc., are indeed true. But don't forget that this is a reference to Voldemort's Death Eater mark. Voldemort can directly control the lives of Death Eaters through the Death Eater mark. The upgraded Golden Dragon magic brand of Lockhart not only has the above functions, but also affects the cognition of the branded person at all times, so that he will not have any other intentions. More importantly, after the brand is formed, it will directly act on the other party's soul. It will not only protect his soul from being harmed, but also directly seal the relevant memories when it detects abnormalities, or even shatter the soul and erase all traces in serious cases. Afterwards, after a brief chat, John and others said goodbye. They came here mainly to thank Master Lockhart for saving their lives, and they were also very curious about his Universal Book Cafe. After achieving their goal, they prepared to start their own dinner to vent the pressure brought by the life and death crisis in the past few days. Chapter 193 Nick Fury's Left Eye. SHIELD Headquarters, Trident Building, 8th floor laboratory. Nick Fury, the director wearing a black windbreaker, looked seriously at the large detection machine in front of him, or more precisely, the black card placed in the middle of the machine, the magic card. Coulson, who was standing next to him, looked at the magic card with a look of inquiry. "Drive Fisher, how is the research on this 084 item, the black card?" Nick Fury asked Dr. Hector Fisher, who was standing next to him. "Director, after our investigation and research, we found that this magic card is very light. The material is similar to metal and contains many unknown elements, including gold, manganese, titanium, etc. that we are familiar with. More importantly, this black card has excellent energy conductivity and can easily store and release a large amount of energy." Dr. Fisher kept explaining. Coulson listened quietly beside him, and Director Nick Fury's eyes were fixed on this magic card produced by Wang Xiang Book Cafe. He heard about the specialness of this magic card from Coulson. When he knew that Coulson had walked out of the Vincian bookstore, his entire memory was affected, and he even forgot the purpose of this mission for a while. His fear of Lockhart suddenly rose to a new level. The other party's way of playing with memory is simply the nemesis of an agent organization like SHIELD. Knowing one person, they can pull them out in a row. SHIELD should be pretty good. The intelligence authority system he is responsible for can play a certain defensive role. If it is the military, with their general intelligence system, there is no defense capability at all. Nick Fury has made up his mind that, if there is no corresponding defense means, he must not meet in person. The information in his head is the top secret of S.H.I.E.L.D. While thinking, he listened to Dr. Fisher next to him constantly introducing. However, Director, we also found that the lines on the surface of this black card have radiation. Drive Fisher, stop for a moment. Nick Fury interrupted coldly, regarding the nature of the black card. You can also submit a written material to me later. I want to know, what function does the black card have? This facing Director Nick Fury's question, Dr. Fisher hesitated a little, and then explained, Director, because of limited time, we have tested the nature of the black card. The specific function of the black card is still unknown, and it needs to be explored later. Believe it. Hearing this, Nick Fury looked at Dr. Fisher, who kept explaining inside secretly. Sure enough, if you want to rely on technology to analyze magic, and analyze a completely unknown field, only geniuses can make breakthroughs. While thinking, Nick Fury's heart moved slightly, and he said to Coulson next to him lightly, Coulson, you are responsible for the Black Card project. Find an opportunity to leak some information and let Tony take the initiative to find you to participate in this project. Okay, Director. Coulson next to him was stunned for a moment and nodded with a wry smile. Finally, he could relax a little, but another project came. He hoped that the bottle of shampoo sent by Professor Lockhart would be useful, otherwise his hair would be ruined again. The only regret was that the director actually took half a bottle, saying that he would do research. What a pity. I don't know if I will have the opportunity to get another bottle from Professor Lockhart in the future. At this moment, Nick Fury didn't care about Coulson's complicated mood. Instead, he stared at the black card closely. At the same time, his left eye, which was covered by the eye mask, began to emit a faint blue light. The reason why he could become the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. is closely related to his past experience. It can be said that it is completely beyond the imagination of ordinary people. Not only did he fight against aliens, but he even witnessed the destruction of alien warships with his own eyes and became friends with a top strong man. Otherwise, how could a black man be in this position for more than 10 years in a row? Among them, he naturally has his own trump card. For example, his eyes. The faint blue light of his left eye was covered by the eye mask, and his sight directly observed the black card through the eye mask. The dark granular surface, light golden lines, and a dark blue liquid slowly flowing inside suddenly hum. Nick Fury groaned, feeling the large amount of information emerging in his mind, and a trace of horror flashed across his face. Magic card, produced by Wang Xiang Book Cafe, is divided into 5 levels in total. This is the 5th level magic card. High level magic card, because it has space teleportation. All consumption of Wang Xiang Book Cafe is paid by magic points. After reading the large amount of information in his mind, Nick Fury's expression returned to normal again, but the faint, slightly rapid breathing still showed his inner restlessness. Coulson next to him seemed to have noticed something, and slightly turned his head to look at his director, but found nothing, and continued to think about how to trick Tony into joining his project. Voluntary joining and passive joining, the efficiency of the two is very different. Then, the director's voice came to his ear. Coulson, Dr. Fisher just mentioned the function of storing and releasing energy in the black card application, and focus on studying this point. Also, at this point, Nick Fury's tone was a little hesitant. In terms of energy, you can try to use some 084 items for experiments, including the Cosmic Cube. When Nick Fury mentioned the Cosmic Cube, his tone was obviously more cautious. Coulson was a little surprised, but still nodded. With his authority, he knew a little about the Cosmic Cube. This was the item that the director valued the most, and the authority requirements for all aspects were usually very strict. But since it was the director's order, there would be no problem. After a while, Nick Fury turned and left. Coulson continued to communicate with Dr. Fisher. He has now taken over this project and has something to do. Just as Nick Fury was receiving the magic card information, Lockhart, who was also in New York, suddenly looked up and looked towards the direction of the trident building of S.H.I.E.L.D. with a faint smile on his face. Just now, he sensed that the magic card he left for S.H.I.E.L.D. was activated so quickly. It seems that the power of S.H.I.E.L.D. is not simple. To activate the magic card, either you have a strong mental power or extraordinary energy. Now, the bait has been seen, and it depends on when S.H.I.E.L.D. will take the bait. He was quite curious about the abnormal items stored by S.H.I.E.L.D. At night, Vincian Book Cafe. The current Vincian Book Cafe is usually closed at night due to a shortage of staff. At this moment, the wizards of Kamar-Taj had already left, and even the house elf gold coins had returned to Lockhart's room for cleaning. Ian, Remy, and Vera stood in the hall, holding their wands in their hands, with expectant expressions on their faces, and a feeling of eagerness to try. Today, Instructor Lockhart said that he would take them to actual combat at night. This is their first actual combat, how can they not look forward to it? Thanks to the lights on the side of the road, Len Yu, the unscrupulous element, the Supreme Master, Lena 2, nothing is controlled, winter rain is flying, the daily life of the sand sculpture, and 241,324 votes for the monthly ticket. Chapter 194, Hand-to-Hand Meeting, Lockhart's Killing Intention. At night, Hell's Kitchen. In Hell's Kitchen, known as the slums of New York, various buildings are piled up in a mess, and it is now very chaotic. Except for the main road, which is relatively flat, the general paths are basically bumpy, and from time to time there are some sewage, stains, and even stench. Some street lamps on the side of the street are either on and off, or there is no light at all. As for intact ones, there is not a single one. It is already night, and in a slightly dim alley sprinkled with street light. Suddenly, a sparking portal opened. The lights that are on and off are mixed with the red flame light, making the environment of this alley a little weird. Then, accompanied by several figures walking out of the portal, a bright ball of light made the whole alley return to light. It was Lockhart and his students Ian, Remy and Vera. After taking a quick look at the surrounding environment, Lockhart waved his wand lightly, and a shielding spell covered the surroundings, to prevent people from entering the alley by mistake. Then, he turned around, and looked at the three people. Lockhart looked at the excitement, expectation, and eagerness on their faces. He said nothing, and looked at them seriously. Soon, under Lockhart's serious gaze, the excitement on the faces of the three people gradually subsided. They looked a little overwhelmed, as if they didn't know why their mentor looked at them like that. Looking at the changes in the expressions of the three people, Lockhart did not explain anything, but said seriously, "This is your first actual combat. Although I'm accompanying you, I hope you must pay great attention to it. Previously, your training was nothing more than two people casting spells on each other, like the little wizards in Hogwarts. You one move, I one move. Such training can only make you more familiar with the release of spells, and it is of no help in combat. Now, the three of you attack me together." Hearing what the mentor said, the three nodded to show that they understood. Looking at their mentor, the three people just raised their wands, and suddenly disarm you. In an instant, three red glowing disarming spells hit the wands in the hands of the three people. Before Ian and the others could react, they found that all the wands in their hands flew into the hands of their mentor. After seeing this, the three felt a little aggrieved, and their eyes were full of resentment when they looked at Lockhart. "Mentor, I know you are powerful, and the three of us cannot beat you. But at least, you let us cast a spell, so that we can luck better." Lockhart ignored the resentful eyes of the three people, and said in a serious tone, "This is my first practical class for you. It is also the most important point of practical combat. Seize the initiative." He is not serious now, waiting for these three people to be like the group of new wizards in Kamar-Taj, no brains, group to die. He has lost all his faith to the dimensional demon. After hearing what the mentor said, the three people had different expressions. Ian fell into deep thought, Remy was a little unconvinced, and Vera seemed to understand but still nodded. In a battle, unless you have overwhelming combat power, if you want to defeat the opponent, you must establish your own advantages and let the opponent gradually fall into your fighting rhythm, rather than being dragged by the fighting rhythm of others. You must remember this sentence. Even if you don't understand it now, remember it and you will gradually understand it after many battles. Lockhart emphasized. "Understood, mentor." The three nodded in unison, keeping the teacher's words in mind. Seeing this, Lockhart nodded slightly and said, "Today, I will only train you one thing, that is, to seize the initiative." Then, Lockhart closed his eyes slightly and sensed what was happening nearby. Soon, the three saw their mentor open his eyes and extend his wand. He drew a circle casually, and a portal quietly emerged, and on the opposite side was also a Damali. "Let's go." Lockhart cast an illusion spell on everyone, and then stepped out of the portal, followed by the three. Hell's Kitchen, the Hand, the drug manufacturing base. Deep in an abandoned factory, a large number of deaf-mute people, in tattered clothes stood in front of long and slender tables. The pale light bulbs above emitted pale light, adding a touch of weirdness to the pale faces of the large number of deaf-mute people working below. Each of them had a stiff expression, as if they were zombies, lifeless, and they kept packing the white powder in their hands like machines, and then put it on the tracks above the long table. In the entire factory, in addition to the deaf-mute people wearing tattered clothes, there were white gangster guards wearing colorful shirts and holding guns in their hands from time to time, wandering around as if on patrol. However, these people were not clean, and sometimes even touched and rubbed the chests of the deaf-mute women passing by. None of these people dared to resist, and could only tremble. At this moment, Lockhart, who had already hidden his figure, was watching this scene with three students. Ian, Remy, and Vera were full of anger in their eyes, and they wanted to go down and kill all the guards and drug dealers with guns. Although they were squibs before and had been discriminated against, they had not been fully exposed to the dark side of the world after all, and the scene in front of them suddenly made them see the darkest side. The cruelty and brutality of this group of drug dealers exceeded their imagination, especially when they learned that these people were living people before and were deliberately made blind and dumb. It can be said that they were furious. Anyone with a conscience could not help but feel angry and furious. And they were upright young men, full of vigor and vitality, and they mastered magic. They were armed with sharp weapons and had the will to kill. At this moment, Lockhart's expression was cold, but he could not help but have murderous intent in his eyes. In his previous life, he hated this set of things, and he had seen the harmfulness of this thing with his own eyes. Therefore, when he sensed this scene, he decided to kill this group of bastards at the first time. While making the students bleed, it could also be regarded as eliminating evil. Ian, Remy, Vera, with this group of drug dealers as your target, you discuss how to minimize the damage to the deaf-mute and kill all the drug dealers. Tell me the plan you discussed in 5 minutes. Remember what I just told you. Seize the initiative. Lockhart looked at the three people with angry eyes and ordered in a deep voice. Then, he reminded, I know you are very angry now, but calm down. Even if you are angry, if you can't calm down, you act like a reckless man. You didn't save the people, and you also sacrificed yourself. If you do such a thing, don't say you are my student in the future. The teacher's words forced the three people to suppress their anger and discuss together. 5 minutes passed quickly. Ian walked in front of him and said in a deep voice, Teacher, our plan is to use first. I'm very sorry, I have urgent matters in the past 2 to 3 days. I will try my best to update more than 2 times. In a few days, I will make up for the missed updates one by one. Dear readers, Xingchen is sorry again. Chapter 195. First Death, Dark Vision. Hell's Kitchen, Abandoned Factory. Bloodstain gangster Graham Fraser held his beloved shotgun and patrolled the factory with his companions, or it would be more appropriate to say that he roamed around. Seeing some white powder sprinkled on the table, he gently wiped it with his fingers, put it to his mouth, and tasted it a little. Well, it's good stuff. Unfortunately, these are all owned by those big guys. For low-level gang members like himself, he would not dare to touch it, even if he had 10 courage. It is said that this factory was built by big guys who are more powerful than the Bloodstain gang. Looking at the methods of these big guys, to be honest, I feel a little scared, thinking that if I make a mistake, my tongue will be cut off, and my ears will be pierced. When I thought of this, Fraser's body trembled subconsciously. After realizing it, he was afraid that his companions would see him and laugh at him. He glanced around and walked forward with a step that did not recognize his relatives. Hey, this girl looks good, but unfortunately she is deaf and dumb, so she can't make any sound when she does it, which is not pleasant. Fraser remembered the close and position of the white girl with a better face. When they finished their work, they could vent together. During work hours, he dared not do anything easily. At most, he would just slap her. If he affected their work, he would be in trouble. While he was thinking, suddenly, confusing curse, confusing curse, confusing curse. Fred heard a shouting voice vaguely, but he didn't know what it meant. Then, hiss, hiss, hiss. Fred suddenly found that his favorite shotgun suddenly turned into a dark green poisonous snake, which was wrapped around his hand. The cold touch made the poisonous snake hiss, and the snake's tongue was constantly extending and retracting towards his face. Ah. Suddenly, Fred trembled all over, and his heart jumped violently, as if it jumped out of his chest. Especially the fang was right in front of him, as if it was going to drip a drop of black liquid and inject it into his body. Suddenly, Fred screamed in fear, and so did his companions around him, constantly making frightened noises and shouting. Then he subconsciously threw the venomous snake wrapped around his arm violently to the ground, trying to avoid the attack of the venomous snake. In the eyes of the deaf and dumb people around him, they found that the wandering demons were full of fear on their faces, their mouths opened wide, and then threw the guns in their hands into the distance. Then Wingardium Leviosa, Wingardium Leviosa, Wingardium Leviosa. Several consecutive floating spells emitting white light shot from the wands of Ian, and others at the guns on the ground. Bang, bang, bang. In an instant, a large number of guns floated in the air, and then quickly flew towards Ian and the other two, and sat at their feet. In the eyes of the thugs, a large number of dark green venomous snakes entangled in a ball and flew away. Then, the venomous snakes turned into the guns they were most familiar with, and landed at the feet of the 2 men and 1 woman. Lockhart looked at this scene and nodded slightly. His 3 students performed well this time. They knew how to seize the initiative, confiscate all their weapons, and minimize the damage. It's a pity that the meditation time is too short, the magic power is limited, and it is not possible to maintain multiple spells at the same time. I can practice it later. Well, I have to let them catch up. Who are you? The thugs who saw this scene shouted loudly, but there was fear in their tone, and they were still frightened. The scene just now really scared them to the point of peeing. To be precise, some people have already peed. Petrify all. Petrify all. Petrify all. Ian and the other 2 did not respond, but kept waving their wands, and one red petrification spell after another kept shooting from the tip of the wand at the thugs, almost reaching the highest level of their training, 1 per second, constantly hitting each other. Bang, bang, bang. In an instant, the thugs who had just been hit by the red light fell to the ground one after another, making a bang. Enemy, enemy, avoid shooting, avoid involvement. The thugs who reacted and found their companions lying unconscious on the ground immediately shouted quickly and hid around. In the Hell's Kitchen where they were, there was no shooting that day, and no death that day, especially for the gang members who had to fight every few days. They were used to it. Although they didn't know what the red light was, it was definitely right to avoid it. After hearing the shouts, the thugs hid quickly, some hiding under the table, some hiding behind the wall pillars, and some even directly used the deaf mute as a physical barrier. Seeing this scene, Ian and the other 2 flashed some joy on their faces. According to their plan, the 2 spells just now have reduced the enemy's force and manpower to the greatest extent. Now, as long as they don't run in front of them, they can't cause much harm to them. Just wait for them to cast spells one by one. Well, the plan was successful. Then bang, bang, bang. Several gunshots rang out, and the whistling sound caused by the bullets hit the bodies of the 3 people heavily. However, the body surface flashed red, and bullets hit the armor spell on the surface, making a bang, and then fell to the ground. Seeing this scene, Ian and the other 2 looked very ugly. Ian, Remy, Vera, this is your first death. Continue. The instructor's faint voice sounded in their ears, and the 3 people's faces showed bitterness. They were careless, and they didn't expect that the weapons they just confiscated were not all. The moment the thought came up, the 3 people hurriedly hid on the stone pillars around them. Bang, bang, bang. You three little brats, you haven't even grown all your hair yet, and you are acting as superheroes for others. Are you looking for death? After a series of gunshots, the thugs shouted loudly, with a tone full of anger. Trample, 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 bang, bang, let me catch you. I have to let you see what fear is. After the threatening voice, accompanied by the sound of footsteps, another round of gunshots hit the wall pillars in front of the three people. Feeling the footsteps getting closer and closer, and the continuous gunshots, Remy and Vera looked a little flustered. They had not expected this scene before. Ian forced himself to calm down, thought about it, and waved his wand directly. Confuse the audience. As Ian quickly chanted the spell, a transparent ripple spread from the tip of the wand to the surroundings. In an instant, darkness fell, and everyone's vision was pitch black. Remy, Vera, magic vision. Pay attention to safety. Ian's loud reminder made them to quickly come to their senses. Magic power poured into their eyes, and they could vaguely break through the darkness in their eyes, and then they quickly shrank their bodies inward. Because bang. Ah, that bastard shot. Bang, bang, puff, puff, bastard. I don't know who fired the first shot, accompanied by the shouts of being shot. This group of thugs, for safety, or anger, directly shot in retaliation in the direction of the attacker. The sharp whistling sound of bullets continued to ring in everyone's ears, the bang bang sound of bullets hitting the wall and the puff sound of bullets hitting the flesh, plus the screams and curses of some thugs, mixed together. The dark factory looked very strange and terrifying. Seeing this scene, Ian and the other two smiled bitterly. They had discussed the dark vision plan before, but they were worried about the phenomenon of chaotic shooting everywhere. Once this phenomenon occurs, not only will they be at risk of being shot by stray bullets, but they may also cause a large number of deaths and injuries to the deaf and dumb people. This is inconsistent with their original intention, so they gave up. Now, Ian is implementing this plan again. At present, although some thugs will die, the deaf and dumb people they originally wanted to save may be even worse. Fortunately, they know that this chaotic shooting will soon pass. Sure enough, a rather fierce voice sounded. I'm Johnny. Everyone, whoever wants to die, keep shooting. Thanks to Sally 2005, Leah Junayu, 7 grains of salt, and the little fangirl of the Yi family for voting for the monthly ticket. Chapter 196 The Blind, the Deaf, and the Mute. Boss Johnny, I didn't shoot. Fredge, who was hiding on the side, touched the still hot pistol in his hand with great relief, and shouted loudly to defend himself. Fortunately, for the sake of safety, he had tied a pistol to his leg before, otherwise he would have no power to fight back if the shotgun was lost. Boss Johnny, I didn't either. Boss Johnny, how should we eliminate the invaders next? Johnny. Hearing the voice of Johnny, who had a great reputation in the Bloodstain gang, all the thugs calmed down from the panic, and shouted one after another. Then, Johnny's voice sounded again. Everyone, listen to my orders, be careful of the invaders, whoever discovers the invaders last, report the location. Boss Johnny, I know, the 3 invaders are in the northeast corner of the factory. Hearing that the other party began to lock on the location of the 3 of them, Ian's heart sank slightly. He was now maintaining the confusion spell. If he cast other magic, he would have to cancel the confusion spell and the darkness would return to light. Then, the situation that was most favorable to the 3 of them would disappear. Unfortunately, a lot of magic power was consumed before, and it was impossible to cast a stronger confusion spell. Otherwise, it would be better to use a more sophisticated illusion to confuse the opponent. Now it can only rely on Remy and Vera. With a flash of thought, Ian began to say to the 2 people not far away, Remy, Vera, you take action. I will cover your attack. Okay, Ian. Remy and the others replied. As they said that, they began to observe the enemy's position carefully. Although Ian cast a confusion spell, they were wizards after all, and they could still see through some. Although it was still dim, the human figure could still be seen. Boss Johnny, what's the next step for us? Looking at the group of thugs who kept shouting and communicating, Remy smiled and suddenly an idea popped up in his mind. He quickly told Vera and Ian, and they instantly approved. The next moment, silent, Remy waved his wand, and a silent spell covered the nearby area. Old Johnny, In an instant, the thugs who were communicating loudly in the darkness to determine the positions of each tribe suddenly felt as if their ears were deaf and there was silence. They kept shouting, but found that their mouths were wide open and there was no sound in their ears. Then buzz. The thug tried to press the trigger, but only found that the pistol vibrated slightly, and there was still no sound. The sound of the gun was also silenced. Even under Ian's efforts to control, even the sparks of the bullets were swallowed up by the darkness. To be precise, the sparks still existed, but they could not see them at all. At this moment, they seemed to have become blind, deaf, and dumb, unable to see or hear, and the words they said could not be spread, as if they only opened their mouths, but did not speak. No matter how they shouted, it was as if they were surviving alone in the darkness. The only thing that made them feel a little relieved was the cold touch of the guns in their hands and the wall they leaned against. Then, petrify all. Petrify all. In the darkness, Vera continued to wave her wand, and one after another very secret petrification spell was produced, hitting the thug. The thug was hit without noticing, and then fell directly to the ground without making any sound. The others didn't know anything, and could only hold the guns in their hands nervously. At this moment, Ian tried to maintain the confusion spell, making the area near the thug fall into a dark illusion, and he couldn't see anything. Remy maintained the silencing spell, silencing all sounds, including the sound of guns and chanting. Vera continued to wave her wand, casting the petrification spell to petrify the thug. But she was very nervous, because she knew that the power of such a spell would be a big expense for the two classmates. If the time was prolonged, they might not be able to hold on. Now he has reached the limit of the speed of casting the petrification spell, and the magic power is constantly consumed. A large number of petrification spells hit the figure in her eyes. The only thing that worried her was whether she hit the thug or the deaf mute. She tried her best to identify the figures of the thugs, but she was not sure. Soon, she stopped casting the spell when she had 10% of her magic power left according to Remy's plan. At the same time, Ian and Remy cooperated very well to stop maintaining the spell. They both consumed a lot of magic power, especially Ian, who consumed the most and almost exhausted all the magic power in his body. The darkness disappeared, and the light reappeared. The three were shocked to find that on the ground, a large number of people also fell to the ground, motionless, with very stiff expressions. There were thugs and deaf mutes. The rest of the deaf mutes who could still move were lying under the table, trembling. When the three were carefully checking whether there were still some thugs alive, suddenly, snap, snap, snap. Ian, Remy, Vera, congratulations, the mission is completed. The three heard the applause and the voice with a hint of laughter from the instructor. Ian and the other two relaxed. Since the teacher said so, there should be no problem. However, bang, bang, bang. A black man who was crawling under the deaf mute suddenly stood up and fired 3 shots at Ian and the other two. Cut the throat with a sharp blade. Instantly, a red light flashed, and a blood mark appeared on the black man's neck. The next moment, blood continued to flow down like a faucet. The black man knelt on the ground, making a sound of struggle, and covered his neck with both hands, trying to keep himself alive for a little longer, but a large amount of blood flowed out, and he finally fell to the ground and died. Ian and the other two looked at the fierce-looking and strong black man in front of them, who fell in a pool of blood, and blood was still slowly oozing from his neck. They were instantly shocked by the black man's tragic scene. He even forgot his second death. "Are you scared?" Lockhart, who showed his figure, saw the slightly frightened expressions of the three people and asked softly. After hearing the mentor's question, the three hesitated for a while, shook their heads slowly, and said with gritted teeth, "Teacher, don't be afraid." "No, you are afraid." Lockhart said lightly, "This is the first time you see someone die, and it is such a tragic scene. It is normal to be afraid." But, at this point, Lockhart whispered to the three people, "Don't forget that he caused your second death." Hearing this, the three looked at the mentor with resentment. This was the second time they were tricked by the mentor today. Lockhart ignored the resentful eyes of the three people. Seeing that they were distracted by his questions, he smiled and asked a question. "I will rescue the deaf mute here. How do you want to deal with the remaining thugs and guards? Discuss it and give me an answer." With that, Lockhart turned around and waved his wand at the people lying on the ground. All the deaf mute people, in tattered clothes, floated in the air. Under Lockhart's control, they stood on the ground one after another, looking at their stiff expressions after being petrified. He gently waved his wand, and with a wave of red flame, these deaf mutes returned to normal from being petrified. Abba, looking at the terrified expressions of these deaf mutes, who kept opening their mouths, but only the deaf and dumb sounds of Abba came out, Lockhart sighed softly. He waved his wand again, and a soothing spell was quietly released, soothing their panic, and letting them slowly calm down. After doing everything, Lockhart turned around again, and asked Ian and the other two again. Tell me, how do you think you should deal with this group of thugs? If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 197. The goodness of the evil is our evil. Facing the mentor's question, the three of them hesitated, thinking that killing them all would be a bit too cruel. After all, they had only killed a chicken before, and they had never killed a person, let alone so many people in one go. Seeing the hesitant expressions of the three, Lockhart certainly knew their mentality. After all, it was the first time they fought and saw blood, so it was indeed difficult for them to decide to kill these 20 or so thugs. They had to straighten their mentality again. Thinking about it, Lockhart did not urge them, but continued. Ian, Remy, Vera, how do you three feel about this battle? Hearing that the mentor changed the question, the hesitant three breathed a sigh of relief, and Remy said excitedly, Teacher, I feel very good about this battle. There were indeed some problems in the front, but the plan I came up with later was very effective. Everyone was knocked down by Vera. At this point, Remy suddenly thought of something, and added with some resentment, except for the thug who was killed by the mentor. Well, he felt that, if the mentor did not say that, they would not let down their guard. If they investigate carefully, the other party will definitely not be able to escape. Of course, Lockhart knew what Remy meant, and said encouragingly, Remy, the plan you came up with is very good. Then, he turned to look at Vera and said, Vera, tell me what you think. Vera thought about it, and found that she seemed to have made no other contribution except for constantly casting spells. The plan was all based on Ian and Remy's, and she was only responsible for execution. Although she also proposed a plan, some loopholes were found and rejected. Then, after thinking for a while, she slowly said, Teacher, I feel that, if we are stronger, it should be easier. At the same time, he looked around, and saw that some deaf mutes were killed, or seriously injured, because of the initial chaotic shooting of the mob. He said in a low voice, the number of deaths of these deaf mutes will be less. Hearing this, Lockhart didn't say anything, but just comforted him. He turned around and asked Ian, Ian, how do you feel? Ian, who had already thought of how to answer, immediately replied calmly, Teacher, our initial plan was a bit taken for granted, and some details were not thought of at all. As a result, we died for the first time. Later, I used the confusion spell to make everyone fall into darkness. This was originally a plan we gave up, because it would cause the scene to fall into chaos, resulting in a large number of accidental casualties of deaf and dumb people. The reality is the same. When he said this, Ian looked at the deaf and dumb people around him who were covered in blood due to bullets, and some of them had even lost their breath. He looked a little self-blaming. He felt that, although the thugs died, many of the rescue targets died because of his actions, and it was all his responsibility. Then, Ian, who had calmed down a little, continued to comment, the subsequent success was mainly due to Remy's plan and Vera's high-intensity spell attack. The effect was really good. Hearing Ian denying himself, and praising the two, Lockhart raised his eyebrows, and did not continue, but smiled and asked, do you want to hear my evaluation? Of course, teacher. The three replied with some expectation. They all hoped that their efforts would be recognized by the instructor. Then your mission can be said to be successful, but it can also be said to be a failure, Lockhart said calmly. Seeing the three people's incomprehensible eyes, Lockhart said lightly, "What is the purpose of this operation?" After that, without waiting for the three people to reply, he continued, "Eliminate the bandits and rescue the deaf mute. Am I right?" Hearing the teacher's words, the three people nodded subconsciously. "Tell me, why do I set these two goals for you?" Hearing the instructor's question, the three people recalled the scene they saw when they just entered the factory, and anger rose in their eyes again. Cruel thugs, artificial deaf-mute people who were like slaves, and the continuous production of white powder. They were constantly arousing their anger towards evil. Then, they heard the instructor Lockhart say, "I told you before that these deaf-mute people had their tongues cut off and their eardrums pierced. They have become dumb and deaf. If they didn't need their eyes to see things, they would have become blind now." Hearing the instructor's serious voice, the three people were silent. "So, we need to save the deaf mutes and give them a brighter future. But we need to wipe out this group of thugs and even the forces behind them, so as to prevent such a tragedy from happening again." Lockhart looked at the three people who were lost in thought and said in a slow tone, "The black man just now is Johnny who shouted loudly before. He calmed most of the thugs with just one sentence. Do you know how he did it?" After hearing this, the three shook their heads at the same time. Seeing this, Lockhart looked at the deaf mutes around him, waved his wand, and continued to stabilize his emotions while shielding his vision. Then, he walked in front of Johnny, pointed his wand at his temple, and slowly pulled out a white mist-like gas like a white ribbon. This was to extract memories from the other party's mind or the remaining soul. With this part of the memory, Lockhart walked in front of the three people and looked at the eyes of Ian and others. The wand lightly touched the memory, and in an instant, the picture appeared in front of Ian and the other two. In the picture, Johnny and the thugs brutally slaughtered the enemy, maliciously fed some children white powder, and then took pleasure in their drug addiction. Beating ordinary people was a minor matter, and he even killed quite a few people. What disgusted Ian and the other two the most was that he humiliated unarmed young girls and even raped deaf-mute people in front of everyone and competed with everyone to see who could last the longest. These ugly scenes had a great impact on the three people. They knew that they were really evil people, but doing evil to such an extent was beyond their imagination. At the same time, the three people looked at Johnny with murderous intent. At this time, the gentle voice of the mentor came to their ears. "Sometimes, our kindness to the evil is actually our evil. Being soft on the evil will not earn him gratitude. On the contrary, it will only exacerbate the evil in their hearts. Especially for someone like Johnny, as long as he is still alive, as long as he is given the opportunity, he will always think about how to hunt you down as revenge. So, this time you didn't find him alive. Do you know what he will do?" The three shook their heads subconsciously. Seeing this, Lockhart said in a cold tone, "The first thing he has to do is to escape from here and find their boss. Tell them everything about your appearance and abilities. Then, they will search for your address and information throughout New York. Finally, if you have family or relatives, they will brutally kill them, and at the same time, they will mobilize all their forces to kill you, or capture and torture you." Hearing Instructor Lockhart describe the entire enemy's revenge plan step by step, the three people's faces darkened. Because what the instructor said was completely true. Based on the information seen in the picture just now, and combined with what they encountered, it is very likely, no, it should be 100%, that they will do it. Seeing the changes in the three people's expressions, Lockhart nodded slightly and said gently, "Today, I will teach you the first black magic that I have modified, Blade to the Throat." Chapter 198 Tony Stark's Radiation Jammer. Blade to the Throat. Blade to the Throat. Deep in the abandoned factory, Lockhart looked at his three students, who kept waving their wands and chanting spells at the petrified thugs lying on the ground, trying to cast the first black magic he taught them, the throat-cutting curse. However, it might be the first time they learned black magic. Each of them had cast the spell more than a dozen times, but none of them succeeded. The best time was just a red light from the tip of the wand, and the spell disappeared as soon as it left the wand. Seeing this, Lockhart was not annoyed. He knew that this was normal for them who had just been exposed to magic for less than 2 months. Although they were gifted, very hard working, plus their own resources, they had already mastered a lot of spells. but the black magic he taught was obviously more difficult, and this was the first spell they mastered with a certain degree of lethality, so it took time, which was normal. Watching the three people constantly casting the throat-cutting curse, Lockhart slowly explained beside them. The reason why black magic is criticized in the wizarding world is that every time you cast black magic, you need to be full of malice in your heart. It can be said that if you cast black magic too much, it will affect your soul, and you will involuntarily be malicious towards others. It will be manifested on the outside as you are impulsive, irritable, and cruel. Therefore, black magic is criticized in the wizarding world. And the black magic that has been transformed by me, or the black magic cast by new wizards, does not have the above shortcomings. Although emotions are still needed as a guide at the beginning, they are very weak. It is enough to have relevant thoughts. It relies more on the power of runes. In the future battles, you will continue to come into contact with such evil people below, and some of them may even be worse. During the Dark Lord period, the group of Death Eaters, to be precise, were people from pure blood families, and their methods were even worse than what you just saw. Not only was the body humiliated, but the soul was tortured. Even the corpses were not spared. They were trained into young corpses for them to drive. The soul was confined in the body, and saw with their own eyes that they killed their relatives and friends, but they were powerless. Don't think I'm exaggerating. What I said is very likely to happen, because their anger, self-blame, and guilt are exactly what the Dark Wizards want to see. These emotions will provide stronger energy for the corpses. They will do it, and in order to further torture the soul and obtain the energy they need, their methods are far more cruel than you can imagine. Hearing the teacher's faint tone, Ian and the other two seemed to have some pictures in their minds, especially the scenes of themselves or their friends being trained as corpses. Every time they swung their wands, the force became stronger and stronger, the runes in their minds became clearer, and the spells became more and more urgent. Blade to the throat. Blade to the throat. Soon, under Lockhart's gaze, Ian's wand tip emitted a dazzling red light and shot at the neck of a black thug below. A red light flashed, and a blood-red thread appeared on the black man's neck, and then his head and body were separated, and blood flowed. Soon, a pool of blood appeared on the ground. Ian stared at the scene. This was his first time killing someone. Although the other person was a bad guy and wanted to kill him, he still felt a little uncomfortable. After seeing this, Lockhart walked to Ian and stared at the pool of blood in front of him like him. He said softly, "Ian, you need to gradually adapt to this scene. In the future, you will encounter more enemies than you think. They are more cunning and cruel, and they will never give up the idea of destroying the new wizards, and they will never be merciful to us. They will only try to kill us like mad dogs. For such enemies, we can only resist with violence. In the process of the birth of the new magic system, bloodshed and fighting are inevitable." Hearing the words of these mentors, Ian nodded slowly to show his understanding. In fact, he had already prepared himself mentally, but he still felt a little uncomfortable when he saw it for the first time, but he just needed to adjust. After all, if he wanted revenge, he couldn't avoid killing. Vera and Remy next to him also heard what Lockhart said to Ian, and they became more determined in their hearts. Soon, both of them successfully cast the throat-cutting curse. Lockhart saw this, and a look of relief appeared on his face. Then, he watched them prepare to continue casting spells to deal with the remaining thugs. Lockhart nodded slightly and turned to look at the deaf mutes around him. Because he had cast the spell in advance, their emotions were relatively stable, but they were a little overwhelmed by the long-term habitual work. They didn't dare to escape, maybe because the people who escaped before were punished, which made them feel terrified. Seeing this group of people, Lockhart had a headache. Lockhart considered himself a person with a very flexible moral bottom line, but if he didn't care about anything, he would still feel a little guilty. After thinking about it, Lockhart still had a plan in his mind. Then, waving the wand, a transparent ripple spread around, gradually changing the memory, cognition, and consciousness of all the deaf mutes. These people, after a long period of torture, have lost their ability and desire to live, just like slave machines. It is still necessary to seal their emotions and memories, to activate their desire to live. This was relatively simple for Lockhart, who had studied memory and cognition in depth. After a while, Ian and the others also successfully dealt with all the thugs. Looking at the bodies of the thugs, Lockhart clapped his hands gently at his 3 students and praised them. Congratulations, you have completed the first practical project. Next, let's talk about your future. In the morning, Stark Villa, 2nd floor, gym. Tap, tap, tap. The regular sound of footsteps continued to sound from the inside of the gym. At this moment, Tony Stark was running non-stop on the treadmill. At that time, his eyes looked through the glass at the distant ocean and the beautiful sunrise on the sea. The sun was red, as if it was a dazzling agate plate, slowly moving upwards. Around the red sun, the rosy clouds were dyed without residue, and the sapphire-like color emitted by the ocean complemented each other, outlining a beautiful picture. Jarvis, increase the speed. Tony ordered the artificial intelligence Jarvis, while enjoying the beautiful scenery. Okay sir, but I remind you again that according to previous data analysis, the current running state can most effectively exercise physical strength and improve physical fitness. After increasing the treadmill speed, it will only greatly increase physical energy consumption and shorten the training time. There is no other help. Excuse me, do you want to continue to improve? Jarvis reminded in a very gentle voice. Continue to improve, Tony said directly. Also, Jarvis, report the progress of the new armor. After that, Tony continued to step on the treadmill for running training. After nearly dying twice in a row, he felt it was very necessary to improve his physical fitness and develop stronger armor to arm himself. Although Jarvis said that he had some mild anxiety, didn't he understand his own state? This is a realistic problem, not a mental illness, let alone an anxiety disorder. Sir, your new armor has been installed with the latest radiation jammer, and the anti-Lockhart armor is on standby at any time. Tony, who was running, heard Jarvis's report and raised his mouth. It's good to have a radiation jammer. He dared to be so arrogant in the future. After thinking for a while, Tony said with a smile, Jarvis, make an appointment with Lockhart for me. The location is at my house. Tell him that there has been a major breakthrough in the project on wizard gold coins. Okay, sir. After Jarvis finished speaking, a radio wave instantly crossed half of the city, as if looking for a certain place. But strangely, it swept across the entire city, but did not find the destination. So, the radio wave continued to diverge, covering the entire city, as if waiting for a certain signal. Once the signal appears, contact the target immediately. Sorry, everyone, the update is late. It is expected that things will be finished tomorrow. There will be 3 updates tomorrow and 5 updates the day after tomorrow. Chapter 199, The Robbed Carlson. In the morning, Lockhart's villa. Inside the magic suitcase, there is artificial turf. On the turf, a large number of pale-faced deaf mutes wearing dark blue clothes stand in a square formation. They all look at Lockhart in the front with a hint of gratitude in their eyes. They are grateful to the handsome blonde man in the front for saving them from hell and making them regain consciousness. When they think of their previous experiences, they only feel darkness in front of them, and despair continues to arise in their hearts. Then, a white light flashes in their minds, and negative emotions are gradually sealed. Emotions change, and negative emotions revolve around one point, all transformed into hope for future life. It's as if, only after knowing the suffering of hell will you desire heaven. At this moment, Lockhart, looking at the performance of this group of deaf mutes, nodded slightly. Ignoring them completely is equivalent to sending them to hell again. If they are sent to a place similar to a police station, Lockhart has only 2 words to evaluate the police station in the United States. Haha. With their nature, who knows how deep the degree of collusion is? Giving it to them is equivalent to giving it to the hands in the meeting. He might as well not bother, just stay where he is, and let the hand take him in. So, as soon as these ideas came to his mind, Lockhart threw them out of his mind. As for him accepting this group of deaf mutes, he clearly expressed his unwillingness. This group of deaf mutes has reached about 100 people. What's the point of accepting them all? Not only is he responsible for eating, but also for drinking. Later, he wants to arrange work, but he doesn't know how to arrange it. After all, so many people are not wizards, and they can't even touch some things. This is too much trouble for Lockhart. So, professional things should be left to professionals. It is most appropriate to hand over such a large number of people to a national agency like SHIELD. Whether they digest it internally or transfer it to a professional institution similar to a school for the deaf and dumb, it is a small matter for them. And for their own face, they dare not make any moves in the middle. How easy it is, and they don't have to waste their energy. Well, SHIELD's Miscellaneous Affairs Department. Now we just have to wait for Coulson to come and take in this group of people. Lockhart looked down at his watch. At 9 AM, Coulson was expected to arrive at the destination. With a flash of thought, Lockhart extended his wand and drew a graceful curve in the air. Instantly, a red flame-colored circular portal opened. On the opposite side was an open space, on which there were 3 buses and some SHIELD agents. Coulson was standing in the front. Seeing this, Lockhart took a step forward. Suddenly, buzz. Lockhart found the vibration of his mobile phone, took it out, and scanned it briefly. Unknown number? Lockhart turned it off directly. It might be another advertising sales call. In his previous life, he was annoyed by these junk calls. After answering, not only was it a waste of time, but he was also bombarded with messages from the other party. It was simply provoking your anger and wasting your life. Therefore, in order to save trouble, he turned off the ads for calls without names or showing fraud. Well, except for courier calls. And then buzz. The phone rang again. Lockhart glanced at it again. It was the same number. He turned it off again. At the same time, he lightly tapped the screen with his fingertips. A faint magic power surged out. Magic power was blocked. Trouble. Although Lockhart felt that something might be wrong, he still felt it was very troublesome. He had things to deal with now. If there was something wrong, he would call again later. Then, Lockhart waved to the deaf-mute behind him and transmitted his meaning to them through his mental power. Seeing them line up and step through the portal in an orderly manner, Lockhart walked towards Coulson. At this moment, Coulson was carefully observing the scene on the other side of the portal. Maybe this was the base camp of the wizard professor. He remembered the lawn and the vague appearance of the partial house in his mind and prepared to go back to see if he could find some information. Well, at least he can write another report. Professor Lockhart, according to your instructions, we have made arrangements. The Deaf Association will be responsible for the placement of these deaf-mute people. Coulson looked at Lockhart, who was coming towards him, and said gently. Lockhart also smiled politely in response and said righteously, my students happened to encounter a group of extremely vicious drug dealers. They actually cut off the tongues of ordinary people, punctured the eardrums, and artificially created deaf-mute people to make drugs. My students have always been full of justice. They dealt with such illegal and disorderly behavior directly. Saving these deaf-mute people can be regarded as eliminating harm for the people. Your SHIELD is a national agency, and these rescued people are just handed over to you to deal with. You don't need to mention my students' names in any news later, just say that you SHIELD did it. Hearing this, Coulson's face was strange. SHIELD naturally heard a little about the affairs of the hand, but it was not related to SHIELD's duties, so they didn't pay too much attention. However, after listening to what Lockhart said, he didn't know how to respond. It sounded like it was for the good of SHIELD, and SHIELD had to accept this favor. Although he complained in his heart, he could only smile gently and said, okay, Professor Lockhart, thank you and your students for your efforts. Then, Coulson heard Lockhart's words. By the way, Coulson, it just so happens that my 3 students don't have official identities yet. Can you help me get them? I'll pay for the price. Hearing Lockhart's almost explicit words, Coulson hurriedly said, no, we will handle the identity issues with SHIELD. This is SHIELD's thanks for your students' heroic behavior. Hearing this, Lockhart nodded with satisfaction. It was a good thing to solve the problem of the deaf-mute today and solve the identity issues of Ian and the other 2 at the same time. It would be easier for the 3 of them to handle some things in New York in the future. Then, Lockhart looked at Coulson's hair, which was still sparse, but at least a little thicker, and teased, Coulson, how is the shampoo I gave you last time? Hearing this, Coulson felt a little helpless. He had just received the shampoo, and the director asked for half of it, saying that he would do research. Then he used it once, and it was not much, but the group of bald people in the research department were like crazy, and they snatched his shampoo directly, saying that they would use it for research. This made him angry. It was not enough to take half of it. Were they going to rob him of everything? He only used it once. He hadn't used much. Later, he complained to the director, and the director told him that the research department might find a new source of income for S.H.I.E.L.D. He also told him to be patient and wait for the product to appear, and he could be the first user. What could he say about this? He could only show a polite but awkward smile to express his agreement. He hoped that the group of research bosses could do it. Well, he was skeptical about these people. If it was Tony who took action, he would still have some confidence, and he recognized the professional level of the group of people in the research department, but there was no actual result. Lockhart sensed Coulson's thoughts, smiled, reached out, and another bottle of Potter family shampoo appeared in his hand. Coulson played with the shampoo in his hand, and his eyes followed it, full of surprise and desire. Lockhart raised his lips and said softly, "Coulson, this bottle of shampoo is a personal gift from me. I hope it will be helpful to you." Apart from anything else, Coulson's ability to do things is good. He remembered that S.H.I.E.L.D. would be destroyed later, and he could win over Coulson to work for him at that time. He believed that with his ability, he could solve a lot of problems for himself. At this moment, Coulson had no idea that Lockhart had taken a fancy to him. His face was full of surprise, and he quickly thanked him. "Thank you, Professor Lockhart, for your shampoo." Just as he was about to continue to thank him, suddenly, buzz. Coulson frowned and found that his phone began to vibrate continuously. His phone was different from Lockhart's. This one was specially customized, and ordinary calls could not be made. He simply took it out and glanced at it. It was an unknown number. After a little thought, he guessed that it was Jarvis's phone. Only artificial intelligence phones would be displayed like this. Tony probably has something to talk to him about, and it's urgent, otherwise he wouldn't call him directly. Usually, he would send an email or text message when he has something to do, and he has to call Tony back specifically, and rarely calls him directly. He recited the rotation and gave Lockhart an apologetic look. After seeing Lockhart nodded to him, he turned aside and answered the phone. "Hello, Mr. Coulson, I'm Jarvis, Mr. Stark's artificial intelligence assistant. There's something I need." Hearing the words of the artificial intelligence Jarvis, Coulson's face looked strange. After a moment, he walked to Professor Lockhart, handed him the phone in his hand, and said, "Professor Lockhart, Tony is looking for you. Thanks to all the big guys, the matter is almost finished. 3 updates today, 5 updates tomorrow, and 5 updates the day after tomorrow. Chapter 200 Tony, I really didn't mean it. Beep, beep, beep." The bus horn sounded. Coulson held the Potter family shampoo tightly in his hand, his eyes full of joy of regaining what he had lost. But at the same time, his vigilance rose to a high level. This bottle of shampoo must be cherished, and cannot be snatched away by those bald heads in the research department. The people in the research department are really shameless. If they find out, they might come to snatch it again in the name of research. The important thing is that he has no way to refuse, even if he runs to the director. Beep, beep, beep. The bus horn sounded again, as if reminding Coulson that all the deaf-mute people have been picked up. At this time, Coulson also saw Lockhart put down the phone in his hand and hurried over. "Professor Lockhart, thank you for your gift. We have taken the deaf-mute here. At the same time, please send me the identity information of your students and their avatars and names later, and I will definitely handle it for you." Hearing what Coulson said, Lockhart nodded slightly and said with a smile, "Then I'll trouble you, Coulson. You can come to the Universal Book Cafe when you are free." Then he said as if hinting, "Don't forget to bring your magic card. You can't go to the Universal Book Cafe without a magic card." Hearing the hidden meaning in Lockhart's words, although Coulson didn't understand it, he still nodded to show that he understood. After returning, he will study this magic card carefully. He feels that the future breakthrough direction should be related to the magic card. After that, Coulson chatted with Lockhart for a few words and said goodbye. After a while, Lockhart looked at the bus going away and snapped his fingers lightly. Snap. In an instant, a white light flashed in the eyes of the deaf-mute people sitting on the 3 buses. Then, all the memories of Lockhart, Ian and the other 2 in his mind were sealed, and there was no trace of impression. He would only simply think that the group of people driving the car saved them. After feeling that the backup plan left in the minds of these deaf-mutes was activated, Lockhart nodded slightly. He was not worried that these deaf-mutes would leak their information. After all, they were deaf and dumb, and it was difficult to express what they wanted to say. But for these deaf-mutes, knowing Lockhart's information itself was a danger. Lockhart believed that many people wanted to learn more from the deaf-mutes, and once they found an opportunity, their methods would be quite cruel. Now Lockhart has the last possibility of something going wrong in his hands. When S.H.I.E.L.D. finds that the memory of the deaf-mutes has been modified, they will naturally not pursue it too much. In addition, with his influence on S.H.I.E.L.D., these deaf-mutes will basically not have too many problems, otherwise it would be too embarrassing. Well, he usually pursues perfection in his habitual pursuit of perfection, and considers things carefully. He despises those who do things on a whim. As the saying goes, great things in the world must be done in detail. If you want to achieve great results, you should pay more attention to some key details. As his mind turned, Lockhart recalled the phone call just now, and his brows raised. Tony Stark came to him and said that there was progress in the artificial synthesis of gold galleons, and he needed to meet to discuss in detail. He also emphasized that he would not go to the Universal Book Cafe, but to his villa, which aroused his curiosity. As his mind turned, he reviewed it again, and it seemed that there was nothing important. So, he stretched out his wand and waved it lightly. According to the positioning mark he left behind, a portal quietly opened. In the morning, Stark Villa. At this moment, Tony was debugging his latest anti-Lockhart armor. Looking at the large dynamometer in front of him, Tony ordered Jarvis. Jarvis, the armor has the maximum strength, and the first round of testing begins. Okay, sir. 3, 2, 1 bang. Tony, wearing the armor, punched hard and hit the target of the large dynamometer in front of him directly. As the target kept shaking, it made a loud noise. After the dynamometer stopped shaking, Tony punched again and there was another loud bang. Bang. After 3 consecutive times, Jarvis began to reply. Sir, this round of testing hit 3 times in total. The data were 2.9 tons, 3.1 tons, and 3.3 tons respectively. According to statistics, the current maximum force data of the armor is about 3.1 tons per punch. After hearing Jarvis's reply, Tony nodded secretly, which was about the same as he expected. Then, he heard Jarvis reminding, Sir, we have just successfully contacted the wizard Lockhart through Agent Carlson, and the other party agreed to come to the villa. Hearing this, Tony, who was about to test the speed, paused his thoughts. As if thinking of something happy, Tony's mouth curled up, and he smiled and ordered, be ready to turn on the radiation jammer at any time, to give our wizard professor a surprise. Okay, sir, it can be started at any time. Jarvis's gentle voice sounded. Then, Tony ordered, prepare to start testing the flight speed, turn on satellite monitoring. Okay, sir. Hearing Jarvis' voice, Tony controlled the armor to lower his arms, palms facing down. At the same time, dazzling white light shone from his palms and feet, and strange small holes appeared on his arms and thighs. This was a device that used wind power to increase speed. Then, the armor floated in the air, and just as he was about to fly out of the villa, suddenly, Tony suddenly found a circle with sparks in the corner of his eyes, and soon, the picture in the middle of the circle changed. He found that the opposite side was a flat land, and standing opposite the circle was the wizard Professor Lockhart he had just read. At this time, he was wearing an anti-Lockhart armor, and was about to conduct a manned flight test. Suddenly seeing Lockhart appear in front of him, Tony was slightly startled. Then zzz. Not good. Professor Lockhart, leave quickly. Tony seemed to be stimulated subconsciously, raised his hand slightly, and fired a laser at the ground under Lockhart's feet. At the same time, he kept shouting, as if it was not intentional. At this moment, Lockhart opened a portal according to the mark he had left on Tony before. Suddenly, he found that Tony on the opposite side was wearing a mecha, as if he was going to fly somewhere. Then, he saw Tony directly shot a laser beam at him. subconsciously raised his right hand, as if sensing something. The silver bracelet on his hand automatically activated, and a red flame shield appeared in front of him. Zizzy. The laser directly hit the bottom of the shield, making a zizzy sound, and the shield began to dim slightly. But as Lockhart replenished his magic power, the shield emitted a dazzling red flame again, and the large number of rune patterns on it became more gorgeous. Seeing this, Tony directly cancelled the laser beam in his hand, and at the same time, as if he was a little sorry, but actually gloating, he said, "I'm very sorry, Professor Lockhart. It's the first time I see space teleportation, and I have some stress reactions. I really didn't mean it." As he said, he looked at the space portal in front of him with great interest. Space technology, he is very interested. When Lockhart heard Tony's answer, he put away his magic items and looked at Tony Stark in the armor in front of him. After a pause, he didn't reply and stepped directly out of the portal and entered the hall of Stark's villa. Then he said lightly, "Tony, I'm here. You said before that there is progress in the Gold Galleon project. What is it?" Seeing Lockhart walk into the hall, Tony nodded slowly, as if thinking about how to answer Lockhart's question. At the same time, he whispered to Jarvis, "Jarvis, turn on the radiation jammer. Maximum power, covering the entire villa." End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.